You sold me?
Do you know what your existence has cost me?
Probably because you told everyone I was cursed. I can't believe this is my life now. If only mother and father were still here. She would spend her entire life taking care of the rotten prince, while I make my own daughter the most powerful queen.
The night my stepmother sold me to a monster, the first sign something was wrong was the chandelier. Zoraya Valimeri stared at it suspiciously from across the dinner table. Then she slowly lowered her spoon. Interesting, she said. Her stepmother smiled too quickly. What is? The chandelier is either possessed, Zoraya replied, or trying to escape this family. Her younger stepsister choked on wine. Lady Seraphine Mourningvale narrowed her eyes with the exhausted irritation of a woman who had regretted adopting a child for nearly 10 years. You always have something clever to say, Seraphine muttered. Only because suffering inspires me. Zoraya, her father's widow hissed. Zoraya leaned back in her chair with lazy elegance, crossing one brown leg over the other beneath the table. Candlelight danced against her dark skin, turning it gold. Tiny amber beads clicked softly in her braids as she tilted her head. Beautiful. That was the problem. Too beautiful. Seraphine hated beautiful things she could not control, especially after her husband died and left nothing behind except debt, rumors, and his inconvenient daughter. The chandelier rattled again. Harder. Zoraya looked upward. The candles flickered green. Her smile vanished. That, she said carefully, feels significantly more demonic than before. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky. Then came the knocking. Not knocking, booming. 3 enormous strikes against the manor doors that shook the walls themselves. Boom, boom, boom. Every servant in the dining hall froze. The fire died instantly. Darkness swallowed the room, and from somewhere outside came the distant sound of screaming horses. Zoraya slowly turned toward her stepmother. Seraphine would not meet her eyes. Ah, that was never a good sign. You sold me, Zoraya said flatly. No, you absolutely sold me. It was a negotiation. With who? Another thunderous boom split the manor. The doors downstairs burst open. Cold air flooded the house like something alive. The servants began panicking immediately. Someone screamed. Someone else fainted dramatically. Honestly unnecessary. Heavy footsteps echoed through the manor below. Not human footsteps, too heavy, too slow, like death itself had decided to take a walk. Zoraya rose from her chair. So, she said calmly, before I potentially die tonight, I would like details. Seraphine stood abruptly. You should be grateful. Zoraya blinked. Grateful? Yes, Seraphine snapped, desperation leaking through her elegant mask. Do you know what your existence has cost me? The debts, the humiliation, the whispers? Oh no, Zoraya said dryly. Not whispers. You should have been married years ago, but no noble family would take you, probably because you told everyone I was cursed. You frightened every suitor. I threatened one man with a fork. You held it to his throat. He touched my thigh. That is not the point. It became the point for him. The footsteps grew louder, closer. The windows began frosting from the inside. Servants fled the room in terror. One maid actually crawled under the table. Zoraya respected the commitment. Seraphine moved toward her now, grabbing her wrist hard. You will go quietly, she whispered harshly. Do you understand me? Zoraya stared at her, then slowly looked down at the hand gripping her. Release me. You belong to them now. Something inside Zoraya went still. Not frightened. Worse. Cold. Outside, the wind howled like dying wolves. You sold me to the Fae, she realized softly. Seraphine's silence confirmed everything. For one long moment, the world seemed to stop breathing. Every child in every kingdom knew stories about the Fae. Beautiful monsters, cruel immortals, creatures who stole names, skinned liars alive, and cursed entire bloodlines over minor inconveniences. And worst of all, the Prince of Noctaryn, the Rotting Prince. Even hearing his name was considered bad luck. Prince Vaeloroth, the immortal monster rotting alive inside his own cursed body. Zoraya slowly looked back at her stepmother. How much? Seraphine flinched. How much did you sell me for? That does not matter. It matters to me. The older woman lifted her chin. 1,000 gold sovereigns. Silence. Zoraya blinked once, then twice. 1,000, she shouted. That's all I'm worth. Seraphine stared at her in disbelief. You are upset about the amount? Yes, you insane girl. I moisturize daily. The dining room doors exploded inward. Everyone screamed. A massive creature ducked beneath the doorway. Not a man. Not entirely. Its body was wrapped in black armor, fused directly into flesh. Antlers curled from its skull like twisted tree branches, and pale green fire glowed through cracks in its chest. The smell hit next. Rot, rain, dead roses. Behind the creature stood 3 enormous black horses with burning white eyes. The room temperature dropped instantly. Zoraya looked at the monster, then at her stepmother, then back at the monster. You sold me to that for 1,000 gold? She demanded. The creature tilted its head slowly toward her. A voice emerged from beneath the helmet. Deep, ancient, inhuman. You are loud. Zoraya crossed her arms. You smell like something that crawled out of a cursed grave. Gasps erupted around the room. The monster went still. Seraphine looked moments away from death. One servant started praying. Another started crying. Then the creature laughed. The sound was terrible, like coffins creaking open beneath the earth. But it was laughter. Everyone froze in horror. The monster stepped forward, closer, closer, until it towered directly before Zoraya. At this distance she could see black veins spreading beneath pale skin. Cracks of green light glowed beneath his throat. Not armor, not entirely. The curse was part of him. His helmet slowly dissolved into shadows, and Zoraya forgot how breathing worked. Oh no, that was unfair. The prince was horrifying, but beautiful, terribly, ruinously beautiful. Long silver-white hair spilled over his shoulders. His features were sharp enough to cut glass. One side of his face looked almost normal. The other, the skin along his jaw was blackened with rot-like magic, glowing faintly beneath the surface, and his eyes, gods. His eyes were ancient forests at midnight. The prince stared down at her, unblinking. You are not afraid, he murmured. Zoraya considered lying. Unfortunately, her mouth had always been committed to self-destruction. Oh, I'm afraid, she admitted. I just also think you look emotionally exhausting. A pause. Then the prince laughed again, louder this time, actually amused. The walls trembled with it. Somewhere behind them, a servant fainted. The prince extended one clawed hand toward her. Come, little bride. Zoraya looked at the hand, then at him, then back at the hand. If I say no, the green glow in his eyes brightened. You cannot. Ah, she sighed. Hate when men do that. Seraphine shoved her forward suddenly. Go! Zoraya stumbled directly into the prince's chest. Cold, impossible cold. But beneath it, a heartbeat, slow, heavy, alive. The prince looked down at her where she rested against him. Something unreadable flickered across his ruined face. Then his hand settled against her waist, possessive, terrifying, careful. Mine, he said softly. The entire room fell silent, and for the first time that night, Zoraya truly became afraid. The journey to Noctaryn began with screaming, mostly Zoraya's. This carriage is haunted. The carriage in question groaned violently as black horses dragged it through the storm. The inside smelled faintly of smoke, roses, and ancient death, also mildew, which somehow offended her more. Across from her sat Prince Vaeloroth himself, enormous and motionless in the shadows like an especially murderous statue. Rain lashed against the carriage windows, or what she thought were windows. After staring for 10 full minutes, she realized they were actually moving walls of black water. Zoraya pointed accusingly. Why is your carriage wet? It is alive. Excuse me? It prefers moisture, the carriage growled. Zoraya slowly turned toward it. The carriage growled again. I hate your kingdom already. The prince closed his eyes briefly like a man summoning patience from another dimension. You speak excessively. You kidnapped me. You were purchased. That sounds worse. A long silence followed. Thunder cracked overhead. The prince sat across from her with impossible stillness, one black-gloved hand resting against the armrest. His silver hair shifted faintly despite the lack of wind. He truly was horrifying to look at for too long, not because of the rot, because of the sadness. It clung to him, heavy, ancient, like grief had rooted itself into his bones centuries ago and never left. Unfortunately for him, Zoraya coped with discomfort by becoming annoying. "So," she said, crossing her legs, "do you eat people? No. Have you eaten people?" A pause. "Not intentionally." Zoraya blinked. There should not be an intentionally. The carriage gave another monstrous groan. Outside the windows the world changed. The forests grew darker. Stranger. Trees twisted toward the carriage as though listening. Glowing eyes appeared between the branches, watching, always watching. Zoraya leaned closer to the watery window. "Why are the trees moving? They are curious about you." "Oh, good," she muttered. "I always wanted to be judged by vegetation." Vaeloroth stared at her for a long moment. "You are unlike humans I have known." That sounds racist. It was not intended to. Still suspicious. Something almost resembling amusement flickered across his ruined face. Interesting. The monster prince might actually possess emotions. Tragic for him. Zoraya noticed something else then. The decay spreading across his skin pulsed occasionally beneath the dim green glow. Pain. He was in pain, constant pain, and trying very hard to hide it. Before she could stop herself, she asked quietly, "Does it hurt?" The carriage fell silent. Even the walls stopped growling. Vaeloroth slowly lifted his gaze toward her. For the first time since meeting him, he looked caught off guard. "No one asks me that." "Well?" A long pause. Then, "Yes." The honesty in that single word unsettled her more than the antlers. Zoraya looked away first. "That's unfortunate," she muttered. His gaze lingered on her. Heavy. Searching. Then suddenly, bang! Something slammed onto the roof of the carriage. Zoraya screamed. The prince did not even blink. Scratching sounds dragged across the ceiling. Then a voice shouted, "Open the window, you emotionally constipated corpse!" Vaeloroth sighed deeply. "Unfortunately," he said, "that is Thistle. The demon, the raven, that was my second guess." The prince snapped his fingers. One of the watery windows slid open. A massive black raven launched himself inside dramatically, scattering rain everywhere. The bird landed directly on Zoraya's lap. She stared at it. The raven stared back. He had one gold eye and one white eye, and somehow looked deeply disrespectful. "Oh," Zoraya whispered, "you're ugly." "I was going to say the same thing," the raven screamed. Zoraya gasped. "You talk." Unfortunately, Vaeloroth muttered again. Thistle puffed his feathers indignantly. "Your bride smells poor." "She smells like road dust and betrayal," Vaeloroth agreed. Zoraya looked outraged. "I smell amazing considering the circumstances." Thistle leaned toward her conspiratorially. "He's been terrifying servants for 600 years. I can hear you, and yet emotionally you hear nothing," the raven shot back. Zoraya burst into laughter before she could stop herself. Real laughter, the kind she had not laughed in years. Vaeloroth stared at her. The sound clearly startled him. Interesting. No one laughed here. Or perhaps no one dared. The raven hopped onto her shoulder. "You're prettier than the last bride." Zoraya froze. "The what?" The carriage became very quiet. Slowly she turned toward the prince. "Last bride?" Vaeloroth looked out the window. "She died. You said that far too casually. She exploded." Zoraya nearly inhaled her own tongue. "She what?" "It was unfortunate." "That is not unfortunate. Spilled wine is unfortunate." "She insulted the castle." "The castle?" The carriage growled threateningly beneath them. Zoraya slowly looked downward. "Your house kills people?" "It is sensitive. I want to go home." "No." "I'm serious. So am I." The simple certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. He truly would never let her leave. The realization settled heavily over her. No family waiting for her. No home. No future she recognized. Just this cursed prince and his horrifying kingdom. Something inside her cracked quietly. Vaeloroth noticed immediately. Of course he did. Predators always noticed weakness. His gaze sharpened. What are you thinking? That I should have stolen more from my stepmother before leaving? The prince blinked once. Then, unexpectedly, a rough, startled sound escaped him. Not quite laughter, but close. Zoraya pointed at him dramatically. Oh my gods, you do have a sense of humor. I do not. That was absolutely amusement. You hallucinated it. Your scary face twitched. It did not. Thistle screamed from her shoulder. He likes you. Vaeloroth looked genuinely murderous. The raven immediately pretended to faint. Hours later, the storm finally began to thin. The forests opened, and Zoraya saw Noctaryn for the first time. Oh, she breathed. The kingdom rose beneath a permanent silver twilight. Massive black mountains surrounded the valley like sleeping giants. Rivers glowed faintly blue beneath the moonlight. And at the center, the castle. Grieving Keep. It towered over the kingdom like a living nightmare. Black spires pierced the sky, green fire burned in hundreds of windows, bridges twisted impossibly through the air, statues moved when she wasn't looking directly at them. The castle looked less built and more grown, like something ancient had clawed its way out of the earth. Zoraya stared in horror. That place is absolutely cursed. It is, and you live there willingly. I own it. That somehow makes it worse. The carriage crossed massive iron gates. As they entered the castle grounds, every light in the fortress suddenly ignited at once. Hundreds of glowing windows opened like watching eyes. The front doors creaked apart slowly. Music drifted outward. Violins, soft, haunting. Then Zoraya realized the musicians standing beside the entrance were skeletons. No, yes, I refuse, you cannot. Why do you keep saying that? The carriage stopped. Silence fell. Outside waited dozens of strange figures, ghostly servants, armored creatures, pale fey nobles, things without faces all staring at her, waiting. Vaeloroth stepped out first. The crowd immediately lowered themselves in fear, not respect. Fear, real fear. Then the prince turned and extended his hand toward her. The cursed green glow beneath his skin pulsed softly in the darkness. Come, little bride. Zoraya stared at him. At the monster prince everyone feared. At the kingdom that looked like death itself. At the impossible future waiting for her beyond those doors. Then she sighed heavily. Well, she muttered, taking his hand, if I die here, I'm haunting everybody. The moment Zoraya stepped inside Grieving Keep, the doors slammed shut behind her with enough force to shake the entire castle. She jumped. Absolutely not. The castle groaned overhead. Somewhere deep within the walls something laughed, not a person. The castle itself. Zoraya slowly turned toward Vaeloroth. Your house is evil. It prefers the term selective. That is something serial killers say. The enormous entrance hall stretched endlessly upward, swallowed in shadow and green firelight. Massive black staircases curled in impossible directions across the walls. Portraits moved, not subtly. One old woman inside a painting openly leaned out of her frame to stare at Zoraya. How dark her skin is, the woman whispered. Zoraya looked directly at the painting. And yet somehow still brighter than your personality. The painted woman gasped. Another portrait snorted with laughter. Vaeloroth closed his eyes briefly. You antagonize everything. It builds character. No, it builds enemies. Same difference. A loud screech echoed overhead. Zoraya looked up just in time to duck as something flew past her face. A tiny ghost child zipped through the hall holding a loaf of bread. 3 skeletal servants chased after him. Come back with the rolls, one skeleton shouted. You'll never take me alive, the ghost shrieked. The child vanished through a wall. The skeletons collapsed dramatically in defeat. Zoraya blinked slowly. I need alcohol. You will adjust, Vaeloroth said. I would rather perish. He started walking. Unfortunately, the terrifying prince expected her to follow him through the nightmare labyrinth of his cursed castle. Zoraya hurried after him. The floors whispered beneath her feet. Actually whispered. She frowned downward. Why is the ground talking? It likes gossip. The floorboards hissed louder beneath her. She smells mortal, very mortal. I heard that, Zoraya snapped. The floor creaked dismissively. Oh, this place can fight. she muttered. Vaeloroth led her deeper into the castle. The halls grew stranger the farther they walked. One corridor was upside down. Another appeared flooded with floating candles drifting beneath the ceiling like stars. At one point, Zoraya saw a suit of armor arguing with itself. I'm telling you, the left shoulder plate makes me look broad. You are broad. You're jealous because I carry the plume better. This castle needs therapy, she whispered. It rejected therapy. That feels medically concerning. Suddenly, a translucent woman drifted through the wall directly in front of her. Zoraya screamed. The ghost screamed louder. Both women stared at each other in mutual horror. "Oh my gods!" the ghost gasped dramatically, clutching her chest. "She can see me. Of course I can see you. You're beautiful. Thank you." The ghost turned immediately toward Vaeloroth. "You brought home a pretty one this time." "This time?" Zoraya repeated weakly. Vaeloroth looked exhausted already. "Mirel," he said flatly, "do not harass my bride." "I would never," the ghost lied instantly. Mirel floated closer to Zoraya excitedly. She wore the faded uniform of an old palace maid, though half her body occasionally disappeared. "You're human," Mirel whispered. "How scandalous." "So I've heard. You're much prettier than the screaming blonde." "The exploding one?" Mirel brightened. "Oh, you know about Celestine." "Unfortunately, she insulted the wallpaper," the ghost explained solemnly. "The wallpaper killed her. The wallpaper was very attached to the prince." Zoraya slowly rubbed her temples. "Of course it was." Mirel drifted around her excitedly. "Oh, the court is going to lose their minds when they see you. They already seem emotionally unstable. That's because everyone here is cursed. That explains a tremendous amount." Vaeloroth suddenly stopped walking. The castle fell quiet instantly. Too quiet. The prince's body went rigid. Zoraya noticed immediately. What? His eyes narrowed toward the darkness ahead. Something entered the west wing. Mirel groaned dramatically. "Again?" Before Zoraya could ask questions, every candle in the hallway extinguished at once. Darkness swallowed everything. A low growl echoed nearby. Deep, wet, wrong. Zoraya froze. "Oh no." Another growl, closer. Green eyes opened in the darkness. Then another pair, and another. Something massive moved at the end of the corridor. Vaeloroth stepped in front of her instantly. Protective. The realization startled her almost as much as the monster itself. The prince's voice dropped into something ancient and deadly. "Leave." The creature crawled forward anyway. Zoraya finally saw it fully, and immediately regretted having eyes. It looked like a wolf stitched together from corpses. Bones protruded through rotting flesh. Black saliva dripped from enormous teeth. The smell alone nearly killed her. "Why?" she whispered shakily. "Is your dog decomposing?" "It escaped the crypts." "That is not an answer." The beast lunged. Zoraya screamed. Vaeloroth moved faster than sight. One moment he stood before her. The next. His clawed hand was wrapped around the monster's throat. Green fire exploded through the corridor walls. The creature shrieked horribly. Vaeloroth's expression became monstrous. Not angry, worse, empty, cold enough to freeze oceans. "You dare," he said softly. The beast whimpered instantly. Oh, that thing feared him. Vaeloroth slammed the creature into the floor hard enough to crack stone. The entire castle trembled. Then suddenly, Zoraya marched forward, holding one of the nearby decorative vases, and smashed it over the monster's head. Crack! Everyone froze. Even the undead wolf looked confused. Zoraya pointed furiously at it. "Bad dog!" "Silence!" The wolf whimpered. Vaeloroth stared at her like she had personally shattered reality. "What are you doing? It tried to eat me." "It is a corpse hound. And now, it's a disciplined corpse hound." The beast slowly lowered itself onto the floor, ashamed. Mirel looked astonished. "She domesticated it." "I did not." The corpse hound nudged against Zoraya's leg cautiously. Its tail gave one tentative wag. "Oh no," she whispered. "Absolutely not." The creature wagged harder. Vaeloroth looked deeply offended. "It has never liked anyone." "Well, clearly it has terrible judgment." The corpse hound licked her hand. Unfortunately, its tongue fell off afterward. Zoraya stared at the detached tongue lying on the floor, then at the hound, then back at the tongue. "I'm going to be sick." Mirelle burst into hysterical laughter. Even Vaeloroth looked dangerously close to smiling again. The prince stepped toward her slowly. Green firelight flickered across his ruined skin. "You are strange," he murmured. Zoraya folded her arms. "You keep saying that like it's news. No mortal should survive this castle calmly. I am not calm. You insult monsters. I insult everyone equally." The corpse hound pressed against her affectionately. She sighed in defeat and scratched behind its ears carefully. "What's his name?" Vaeloroth paused, then quietly admitted, "He does not have one." Zoraya looked horrified. "You never named your undead murder wolf?" "It did not seem necessary. It absolutely seems necessary." The hound sneezed out black smoke. Zoraya considered carefully, then nodded once. "His name is Pickles." The silence that followed was catastrophic. Mirelle shrieked with laughter, loud enough to rattle windows. Even the suits of armor down the hallway started cackling. Vaeloroth stared at her in disbelief. "You named the corpse hound Pickles. He looks like a pickles." The undead beast barked happily, traitorously. Vaeloroth looked at the creature with deep betrayal. "You were forged from battlefield nightmares." Pickles wagged harder. Zoraya grinned triumphantly. And somewhere deep within the cursed castle, the walls groaned with laughter. By morning, the castle had decided it loved Zoraya. This was unfortunate for everyone involved. She discovered this after waking up to find her bedroom had doubled in size overnight. "No." Zoraya stood in the center of the enormous chamber wearing only a sleeping robe in confusion. Yesterday the room had been reasonably horrifying. Now it looked like a queen's suite designed by emotionally unstable ghosts. Black silk curtains draped from the ceiling. Fresh moonflowers bloomed along the windows. A fireplace crackled softly despite containing green fire. And somehow, the castle had acquired a chandelier shaped like screaming angels. Zoraya pointed at it accusingly. "You are doing too much." The chandelier shrieked faintly. A nearby wardrobe opened on its own. Inside hung dozens of gowns she definitely did not own. Oh, absolutely not. One black dress floated forward hopefully. "No." The dress drooped sadly. Zoraya stared. The dress stared back. "I need to leave this kingdom immediately." A knock sounded at the door. Then it exploded open before she could answer. Mirelle floated inside dramatically. "You're alive. I'm beginning to think that was a mistake." The ghost maid zipped around the room excitedly. "The castle likes you." "I noticed. It hasn't liked anyone in 400 years. That feels unhealthy." "Oh, it's deeply unhealthy." Mirelle suddenly gasped. "You slept in the East Royal Chambers." Zoraya blinked. "And?" The ghost looked scandalized. "Those belong to the prince's future queen." Silence. Then, "Oh, absolutely not. It chose for you." "I reject its decision." "The castle rejects your rejection. Can a building stop making choices for me?" The fireplace hissed. A pillow hit her in the face. Mirelle laughed so hard she briefly disappeared through the floor. Before Zoraya could continue arguing with architecture, another knock echoed through the room. This one heavier, slower. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Mirelle straightened. "Oh," she whispered, "that's him." Zoraya's stomach betrayed her with one deeply unnecessary flip. Annoying. The doors opened slowly. Prince Vaeloroth entered like midnight itself. Dark robes trailed behind him. Silver hair spilled over broad shoulders. The cursed glow beneath his skin pulsed faintly in the dim room. Terrifying. Beautiful. Extremely rude of him, honestly. His eyes landed on her and stopped. Zoraya looked down at herself. Thin robe, bare shoulders, hair wild from sleep. Ah, wonderful. She was about to perish from embarrassment. Vaeloroth went completely still. The room temperature dropped instantly. Mirelle looked between them with the excitement of a woman witnessing live entertainment. "Interesting," the ghost whispered. "Leave," Vaeloroth said immediately. Mirelle vanished through the ceiling. Coward. An awkward silence followed. Zoraya crossed her arms defensively. You could knock properly. I did. Then wait for permission like a civilized person. I am Fae. That explains the lack of manners. His gaze remained fixed on her throat, then lower, then quickly away again. Oh. The horrifying immortal prince was flustered. This information was life-changing. Zoraya smiled slowly. Are you uncomfortable? No, you look uncomfortable. I do not. You're radiating discomfort. I am radiating murderous intent. Toward who? A pause. Myself. Zoraya nearly laughed out loud. The rotting prince was having emotions, disastrous for him. Vaeloroth abruptly turned away from her. You are expected at dinner tonight. With? The court. The same court that hates humans. Yes. And they want dinner with me? No. That makes significantly more sense. He moved toward the door again, then stopped. Without turning around, he asked quietly, Did the room please you? Zoraya blinked. The question sounded so strangely careful, like he genuinely wanted to know. Her irritation softened slightly. It's beautiful, she admitted. The cursed green glow beneath his skin flickered warmly. Then he vanished into shadows before she could say anything else. Coward. That evening, Zoraya entered the royal dining hall prepared for disaster. She was still unprepared. The room was enormous. Long black tables stretched endlessly beneath floating chandeliers. Hundreds of pale Fae nobles filled the hall dressed in silver and jewels. Every single conversation stopped when she entered. The silence hit like a slap. They stared openly, at her dark skin, her human heart, her existence. Zoraya lifted her chin anyway. If they wanted a spectacle, she would become one. She wore the black gown the castle had forced upon her earlier. Gold jewelry gleamed against rich brown skin. Her braids had been woven with tiny moonstones by ghost servants who cried emotionally the entire time. At the far end of the hall sat Vaeloroth upon a throne of black thorns. Gods, he looked devastating. One clawed hand rested against his jaw as he watched her approach. Waiting, the nobles parted reluctantly, like frightened fish avoiding a shark. Zoraya reached the throne platform, then glanced around the room. Why does everyone here look allergic to joy? Several nobles gasped. One old Fae woman nearly dropped her wine. Vaeloroth's mouth twitched, barely, but she saw it. A servant pulled out her chair beside the prince. The entire hall looked horrified by this. Interesting. Apparently sitting beside the prince was important. Zoraya sat anyway. Immediately, silver goblets filled themselves with dark wine. The food arrived next, and honestly, terrifying. Zoraya stared at the plate before her. Is this moving? It is fresh, Vaeloroth said. The roasted creature on her plate blinked. No, you should eat. It winked at me. Across the table, a beautiful male Fae leaned back lazily in his chair. Unlike the others, he smiled at her openly. Dangerous smile. Pretty enough to start wars. Prince Edrian, though Zoraya did not know that yet. How refreshing, he drawled. A bride that speaks. Vaeloroth's entire body stiffened. Ah, interesting. The beautiful one was a problem. Edrian raised his goblet toward her. I am Prince Edrian, dear cousin to our beloved rotting tyrant. Adrian, Vaeloroth said coldly. What? Adrian smiled innocently. I'm welcoming her. His silver eyes slid back to Zoraya. You are far lovelier than the rumors claimed. Zoraya smiled politely. You are far prettier than seems trustworthy. Several nobles choked violently. Edrian burst into laughter. Vaeloroth looked one minor inconvenience away from homicide. Excellent. Then, a servant suddenly collapsed beside the table, dead. The entire hall froze. Black blood spilled from the servant's mouth. Poison. Zoraya shot to her feet instantly. The servant pointed weakly toward her wine goblet. Gasps erupted through the hall. Someone had poisoned her. Chaos exploded. Nobles started shouting. Guards drew weapons. And Vaeloroth stood slowly. The entire castle trembled. Green fire erupted through the chandeliers. The prince's expression became monstrous, ancient, furious. Every noble immediately fell silent in terror. His voice dropped into something inhuman. Who, he asked softly, touched my queen? Queen! The word echoed through the hall. Shock ripped across every face present. Even Zoraya froze. Vaeloroth looked at the poisoned goblet, then at the terrified nobles, and smiled. It was the most horrifying thing Zoraya had ever seen. "Wonderful," the Rotting Prince whispered. "Now I may finally kill someone." The dining hall descended into absolute chaos, which, in Zoraya's opinion, was impressive considering the castle already looked permanently chaotic. Fae nobles shouted over one another. Servants fled. Somebody near the back started crying. And at the center of it all stood Prince Vaeloroth, looking moments away from committing several ancient war crimes. Green fire crawled across the floor beneath his boots. The chandeliers screamed overhead, actually screamed. Zoraya was beginning to suspect the entire castle needed holy water. The poisoned servant was carried away while trembling guards searched the hall desperately. Nobody wanted to be the first person Vaeloroth blamed. Reasonable, honestly. The prince descended from his throne slowly. Every movement radiated death. He stopped beside Zoraya's chair, then very calmly picked up the poisoned goblet. The silver melted instantly in his hand. "Oh, that felt medically concerning." "Interesting," he murmured. The room held its breath. Vaeloroth turned toward the nobles. "Whoever attempted this assassination," he said softly, "will pray for death long before I grant it." A noblewoman fainted immediately. Edrion sighed dramatically into his wine. "You do say the most romantic things." Vaeloroth ignored him completely. Unfortunately, the prince then looked directly at Zoraya, and somehow that was worse. His ancient eyes searched her face carefully, checking, making sure she truly was unharmed. The realization made her chest feel strange, annoying. "I didn't drink it," she said quickly. "I know, you're staring like I already died." Silence. Then quietly, "I have buried enough people." The room went still. The words settled heavily between them. For one brief moment, the terrifying prince looked tired. Not immortal, not monstrous, just exhausted. And suddenly Zoraya understood something horrifying. Vaeloroth expected everyone close to him to die eventually. That was why he kept himself distant. Cold, cruel. It was easier than grieving. Unfortunately for him, Zoraya's survival instinct had always been deeply connected to bad decisions. So naturally she reached out and grabbed his hand. The entire dining hall gasped. Vaeloroth froze. So did she. Mistakes had been made. The prince stared down at their joined hands like he had forgotten what touching was. His skin was freezing, not metaphorically, actually freezing. Black curse marks glowed faintly beneath pale flesh. Zoraya should let go. Instead, her thumb brushed lightly across his knuckles. The green fire throughout the hall immediately exploded brighter. Several nobles screamed. One chandelier burst into tears. Vaeloroth inhaled sharply. Oh. That reaction should not have affected her as much as it did. His gaze lifted slowly to hers. Dangerous, hungry, not for flesh, for warmth. The realization hit her like lightning. This man had not been touched gently in centuries. The cursed prince looked at her like she had done something catastrophic, merely by holding his hand. Edrion abruptly stood from his seat. "Well," he announced loudly, "this is emotionally devastating for everyone." The moment shattered. Zoraya snatched her hand back instantly. Vaeloroth looked almost... "No, surely not disappointed. Absolutely not." The prince straightened slowly, his expression returning to cold perfection. But the green fire in the hall still burned wildly. Interesting. Very interesting. Then, suddenly, Thistle the raven crashed through one of the windows. "Assassination!" he screamed. Everyone flinched. "We're having assassination again!" "Thistle," Vaeloroth said dangerously. "Don't thistle me, you morbid tree." The raven landed directly on the dinner table and strutted through several expensive dishes. "Someone poisoned the bride," he continued dramatically, "which is rude because I just started liking her." "You like me?" Zoraya asked. "Don't make this emotional." The raven hopped closer to the melted goblet, then abruptly turned toward the nobles. His feathers puffed up. "Oh!" he whispered. The room quieted instantly. Thistle tilted his head, then pointed one wing dramatically toward the far end of the table. "You smell like poison." A young Fey lord went pale. The entire hall turned toward him. The noble stammered immediately. I did no such thing." Vaeloroth moved. No warning, no sound. 1 second the prince stood beside Zoraya. The next he had the noble pinned against the wall by his throat. The castle shook violently. The noble clawed desperately at the prince's hand. Green fire spread up the walls around them. "You attempted to murder what is mine," Vaeloroth said softly. The noble sobbed. "No, I swear, I was paid—" Silence. Vaeloroth's eyes narrowed. "By whom?" The noble hesitated. Wrong choice. The prince's curse flared instantly. Black rot spread briefly across his hand. The noble screamed in agony. And suddenly, "Edrian!" The hall froze. Prince Edrian stopped swirling his wine. Slowly, beautifully, he smiled. Well, he sighed. "This certainly complicates dinner." Every noble in the room looked ready to die. Zoraya stared between the cousins. The tension became unbearable instantly. Vaeloroth's voice turned glacial. "You dare!" Edrian rose gracefully from his seat. Silver robes shimmered around him like moonlight. Unlike Vaeloroth's terrifying presence, Edrian felt charming. Warm, false. "I merely wish to test the human," Edrian said smoothly. "Surely that is understandable. You poisoned her, a little... Edrian ignored Zoraya entirely. "She survives," he continued calmly, "which means she may actually be useful. Useful. Not human, not innocent. Useful." Vaeloroth's expression darkened dangerously. "You forget your place." "No," Adrian said softly. "I remember yours." The hall became deathly silent. Something ancient passed between the two princes then. Old hatred, old wounds, old power. Zoraya suddenly realized this wasn't simple family. This was war pretending to wear jewelry. Then Edrian's silver eyes slid toward her again, and smiled. "Oh dear," he murmured. Vaeloroth immediately moved in front of her, protective, possessive, terrifying. Edrian's smile widened. "You truly like this one." The castle went silent. Even the walls stopped whispering. Vaeloroth's voice dropped low enough to terrify gods. "Leave," Edrian gave a dramatic sigh. "As you wish, cousin." But before leaving, the beautiful prince paused beside Zoraya. Leaning close enough for only her to hear, he whispered, "You should be careful." Zoraya narrowed her eyes. "Of?" Edrian smiled faintly. "The last thing Prince Vaeloroth loved destroyed this kingdom." Then he vanished into shadows. Silence followed. Heavy silence. Zoraya slowly looked toward Vaeloroth. The prince stood motionless, cold again, closed again, like a door had slammed shut inside him. Interesting, and deeply suspicious. The nobles quickly fled the hall after that. Nobody wanted to remain near the rotting prince's temper. Soon only Zoraya and Vaeloroth remained beneath the screaming chandeliers. The prince stared at nothing, tense, furious, hurting. Finally Zoraya crossed her arms. "So," she said carefully, "what destroyed the kingdom?" Vaeloroth did not answer immediately, which meant the answer was terrible. The prince stood beneath the green firelight, motionless as stone, while the dining hall slowly emptied around them. The silence stretched, then stretched longer. Zoraya folded her arms. "If you stare dramatically into the distance any harder, the walls might fall in love with you." "Nothing. Then finally my mother destroyed this kingdom." "Oh." That was not the answer she expected. The chandeliers dimmed slightly. Even the castle seemed uneasy now. Vaeloroth turned away from her and began walking toward the massive doors. "Come, that is not a proper explanation. You are receiving none other, emotionally frustrating man. You continue speaking despite the danger it brings you. You continue kidnapping women despite the social implications." A pause. Then, barely audible, "Fair." Zoraya blinked. Had the terrifying immortal prince just admitted she had a point? Impossible. Suspicious. She hurried after him through the twisting halls of Grievemorn Keep. Tonight, the castle felt different. Restless. The walls whispered louder than before. Something scratched behind closed doors. Ghost servants drifted through corridors carrying silver trays and gossip. Everywhere they passed, creatures bowed to Vaeloroth in terror. Not respect, never respect. Fear clung to him like another shadow, and Zoraya was beginning to hate that, which felt deeply inconvenient. As they rounded another corner, music suddenly echoed through the halls. Not soft music, wild music, violins shrieking, drums pounding, people laughing. Zoraya frowned. Why does it sound like your castle is throwing a party without you? Vaeloroth looked exhausted instantly. The Midnight Court. That sounds illegal. It should be. The music grew louder. Then the hallway opened into enormous golden doors. The moment they stepped through, chaos. Absolute chaos. A massive ballroom stretched before them, lit by floating blue flame. Hundreds of fae danced beneath glittering chandeliers, while ghost musicians played from balconies overhead. Some guests floated instead of walking. Others had antlers, wings, glowing skin, or eyes entirely black. A woman made of smoke drank champagne beside a man with a wolf skull for a face, and somehow, someone had brought a live peacock wearing jewelry. Zoraya stared. What in the haunted circus is this? The Midnight Court gathers every full moon, Vaeloroth said flatly. No one invited me? No one invited them either, a nobleman nearby shouted. Long live bad decisions! The crowd cheered wildly. Zoraya immediately loved this place. Unfortunately, the room noticed her. Music stumbled to a halt. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the human bride standing beside the rotting prince. Whispers erupted instantly. That's her! She touched him. She survived dinner. She's gorgeous. She's doomed. One woman fainted dramatically onto a couch. Zoraya pointed. That one seems committed to the performance. She does that weekly, Vaeloroth muttered. Then suddenly, a body slammed into Zoraya at full speed. She nearly died. You're real. A tiny woman with copper skin and bright white curls grabbed both her hands excitedly. She wore about 17 necklaces and smelled strongly of explosives. Vaeloroth sighed deeply. Lady Isolde. A human queen, the woman shrieked. I am not queen. Yet. The ballroom exploded into gossip again. Vaeloroth looked one insult away from homicide. Lady Isolde ignored him completely. I'm Isolde, she announced proudly. Royal alchemist. Occasional criminal, occasional. Depends on the season. Zoraya immediately liked her. Isolde leaned closer conspiratorially. The prince hasn't attended Midnight Court in 90 years. Zoraya blinked. 90? He hates joy. I do not hate joy, Vaeloroth said coldly. The entire ballroom stared at him silently. Then one Fae man whispered, You threatened a violinist once. He was off. He was tuning. Vaeloroth looked unmoved. Isolde patted Zoraya sympathetically. You'll get used to him eventually. I strongly doubt that. Suddenly the crowd parted, and the room temperature dropped. Prince Edrion entered the ballroom smiling. Unfortunately, he looked even prettier tonight. Silver jewels dripped from dark robes. Moonlight itself seemed to cling to him. Several people visibly stopped breathing when he walked past. One woman actually walked into a pillar. Embarrassing. Edrion's eyes found Zoraya immediately, then shifted toward Vaeloroth standing beside her, and sharpened slightly. Interesting. Jealousy. That explained several things. Well, Edrion drawled smoothly, approaching them. The kingdom grows more scandalous by the hour. Vaeloroth's voice turned glacial. You poisoned my bride. A misunderstanding. You attempted murder. A cultural misunderstanding. You hired an assassin. A networking opportunity. Zoraya burst into laughter before she could stop herself. The two princes looked at her. Edrion smiled slowly. Vaeloroth looked betrayed by the existence of joy itself. Then, the music started again. A haunting waltz drifted through the ballroom. Couples returned to dancing beneath blue firelight, and suddenly every noble nearby became intensely interested in watching Zoraya. Oh no, absolutely not. Edrion bowed elegantly before her. Dance with me. Vaeloroth's expression became catastrophic instantly. Interesting, very interesting. Before Zoraya could answer, another voice interrupted. She cannot. The crowd parted again. An old blind woman entered slowly, using a staff carved from silver bone. Everyone bowed immediately. Even Edrion straightened. Power rolled through the room like thunder. Mother Nixara, the ancient oracle. Her eyes were completely white, and somehow still terrifying. Nixara stopped directly before Zoraya, then inhaled sharply. Silence fell across the ballroom. The oracle's expression changed. Shock. Real shock. "Oh," she whispered. Her trembling hand reached towards Zoraya's face. "The moon remembers you." The ballroom went still. Vaeloroth stepped forward immediately. "What did you see?" Nixara ignored him. Her blind eyes remained fixed on Zoraya. Then slowly, the old woman knelt. The entire ballroom gasped. Edrian's smile vanished completely. "What are you doing?" Vaeloroth demanded. Nixara's voice shook. "She bears the blood." Silence. Dead silence. Zoraya blinked. "The blood of what?" The oracle looked terrified. "The first queen's." Everything changed. The atmosphere, the room, the princes, even the castle itself groaned deeply around them, like something ancient had awakened. Vaeloroth stared at Zoraya in disbelief. Adrian looked calculating now, dangerously calculating. Whispers exploded through the ballroom. The moon bloodline. Impossible. They were exterminated. The curse. Then suddenly, every candle in the ballroom extinguished at once. Darkness swallowed the A scream echoed somewhere nearby. Then another. People panicked instantly. Blue fire erupted along the walls. And from the shadows at the far end of the ballroom, something moved. Tall, wrong. A figure wearing a shattered crown emerged slowly from the darkness. Its body dripped black rot. Its eyes glowed green. The dead queen had arrived. The dead queen smiled. Zoraya immediately decided she hated that. The creature standing at the far end of the ballroom wore what remained of royal elegance like a corpse wearing perfume. Torn black silk dragged behind her. A shattered silver crown rested crookedly atop long white hair. Rot spread across her skin like cracks in porcelain. And yet, she was beautiful, terribly beautiful. The kind of beauty that survived death out of pure spite. Green fire flickered in her empty eyes. The ballroom had gone utterly silent. No one breathed, no one moved. Then the dead queen spoke. "My son." Vaeloroth went rigid beside Zoraya. Oh no, that was his mother. The same mother who had apparently destroyed an entire kingdom. Wonderful. The queen's gaze slowly shifted towards Zoraya and sharpened. The smile disappeared instantly. Hatred flooded the room, pure hatred. "Well," the dead queen whispered softly, "there you are." The castle trembled. Several nobles fled immediately. One man jumped through a window. Honestly fair, Vaeloroth stepped directly in front of Zoraya. Protective, again. "You should not be here," he said coldly. His mother laughed quietly. "And yet I am—" The sound crawled beneath Zoraya's skin. This was not a ghost, not exactly. This thing felt old, wrong, like grief and madness had stitched themselves into human shape. The queen tilted her head slowly. "She looks like her." Vaeloroth's jaw tightened instantly. Interesting, very interesting. The dead queen took another step forward. Every flower in the ballroom withered immediately. "You brought another mortal into this castle," she whispered. "Have you learned nothing?" Zoraya frowned. "Another? Excuse her?" The queen's eyes shifted toward her, and suddenly Zoraya felt freezing cold. "You should run, child." Vaeloroth's voice cracked through the room instantly. "Enough!" The green glow beneath his skin exploded brighter. For one terrifying moment, mother and son simply stared at one another. Hatred, ancient hatred. Then the dead queen smiled again. "You love this one already." Silence. The ballroom froze solid. Vaeloroth's expression became murderous. "I do not." But he answered too quickly, and everyone noticed, especially Adrian. The beautiful prince stood nearby, watching everything unfold with narrowed silver eyes, calculating, always calculating. The dead queen laughed softly. "Oh, Vaeloroth," she whispered, "you never could lie." Then her gaze snapped back to Zoraya, and the hatred returned full force. "Tell me, little human," she asked softly, "has he warned you yet?" Zoraya crossed her arms. "Warn me about what?" The queen smiled wider. "What happens to the women he loves?" The ballroom went silent again. Vaeloroth moved instantly. "Leave!" The walls shook violently. The dead queen merely looked amused. "He didn't tell you," she murmured. Zoraya's stomach tightened. Didn't tell her what? The queen drifted closer. Vaeloroth's magic surged dangerously around them. "She died screaming," the queen whispered. Zoraya froze. She begged him to save her. The prince's voice became inhuman. "Stop!" But the queen continued smiling at Zoraya. And when she burned alive, she whispered gently, "My son chose the kingdom over her." The words hit like knives. Something awful crossed Vaeloroth's face then. Not anger, guilt, real guilt. Zoraya's chest tightened painfully. Before she could speak, the dead queen vanished into smoke. Gone. The ballroom erupted instantly. Whispers spread like wildfire. Another lover. She burned. The prince failed her. He brought another human. Zoraya turned slowly toward Vaeloroth. The prince stood motionless, cold, unreadable, but the guilt remained in his eyes. And suddenly she understood. There had been another woman, another mortal, another bride, and she had died because of him. Something ugly twisted inside Zoraya's chest. Not fear, jealousy, stupid, completely irrational, but there it was anyway. "You said the last bride exploded," she said quietly. Vaeloroth looked away. "She did. That was not the full story." Silence. Edrian chose that exact moment to speak. "How unfortunate," he murmured softly. Vaeloroth's expression darkened instantly. Edrian stepped closer to Zoraya now, gentle, warm, nothing like the terrifying prince beside her. "You should know the truth," Edrian said quietly. "Edrian," Vaeloroth warned. But Edrian ignored him. "The woman before you was named Lyriel," he said softly. "She was human too." Zoraya hated how much that bothered her. "She loved my cousin desperately." Vaeloroth's magic crackled violently. "And he loved her," Edrian continued. The ballroom watched breathlessly. Then the curse consumed her anyway. Zoraya looked toward Vaeloroth. He still wouldn't meet her eyes. That hurt more than it should have. "She died in this castle?" Zoraya asked quietly. No answer, which was answer enough. Edrian's silver gaze softened slightly as he looked at her. "My cousin destroys everything he loves," he said gently. Vaeloroth snapped. The ballroom exploded with green fire. Every window shattered at once. Nobles screamed. The floor cracked beneath the prince's feet. "Enough!" His voice shook the entire castle. Edrian's smile vanished. The cousins stared at each other with open hatred now. Not hidden, not subtle, war. Then suddenly, Vaeloroth grabbed Zoraya's wrist. "Come!" The command left no room for argument. He dragged her from the ballroom immediately. The castle halls blurred around them as they moved. Fast, too fast. His grip remained careful despite his fury. Like even angry, he feared hurting her. Unfortunately, Zoraya was furious too. "You lied to me." Vaeloroth kept walking. "You asked no questions. That is a terrible defense. I owe you no explanations." The words hit harder than they should have. Fine, wonderful, excellent. Hatred flared hot in her chest. Not because he had another woman before her. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that somehow, she had started caring, and now she felt stupid for it. Vaeloroth finally stopped inside a massive dark corridor lined with moonlit windows. His curse pulsed violently beneath his skin. He looked exhausted, dangerous, broken. "She should not have spoken of Lyriel," he said quietly. Zoraya laughed sharply. "Oh, forgive me for being upset that the last woman you loved died horribly. I did not love her." The answer came too fast again, too sharp. Another lie. Zoraya's anger worsened instantly. "You are a terrible liar," his eyes flashed. "And you are reckless. At least I'm honest." Something dangerous shifted across his face then. "Honest," he repeated softly. "Yes, you hide fear behind humor." Zoraya froze. "You pretend cruelty cannot wound you." Her throat tightened. "You force people away before they may abandon you. Stop. You laugh while bleeding. Stop." The hallway shook violently. Silence crashed between them. Vaeloroth stared at her, breathing heavily, not from exhaustion. Emotion. Too much emotion. The prince looked at her like he hated himself for understanding her, and somehow that made everything worse. Then quietly, almost angrily, he asked, "Why do you care?" Zoraya opened her mouth, then stopped, because she didn't know. And that terrified her most. For the next 3 days, Zoraya avoided Prince Vaeloroth completely. which would have been easier if the castle itself wasn't actively sabotaging her. Every hallway led to him somehow, every staircase mysteriously redirected. Once, she opened a wardrobe and found the prince inside reading. They stared at each other for a full 5 seconds before Zoraya quietly closed the door again. From inside she heard him sigh. The castle was absolutely doing this on purpose. Traitorous architecture. Unfortunately, avoiding her own feelings proved significantly harder. Because the problem was this: Vaeloroth frightened her. Not physically, emotionally. He looked at her too carefully now, like he saw things she hid from everyone else. And worse, she kept thinking about the way his voice changed whenever he said mine, deeply embarrassing for her. So naturally she coped in the healthiest possible way, by stealing wine and hiding in the forbidden section of the castle gardens at midnight. The moon garden was unlike the rest of Noctaryn. Quiet. Silver flowers glowed beneath the stars. Pale vines curled around ancient statues covered in moss and moonlight. At the center stood a black lake reflecting the sky perfectly. Beautiful, peaceful, suspicious. Zoraya sat beside the water, holding an expensive bottle she absolutely stole from the royal kitchens. Pickles rested beside her, happily chewing on what appeared to be a femur. "Don't crunch so loud," she muttered. The corpse hound wagged his tail proudly. A soft wind drifted through the garden. Then, "You are difficult to locate." Zoraya froze. Vaeloroth stepped from the shadows. Of course he did. The prince wore no crown tonight, no armor either, only dark robes loose around broad shoulders, silver hair catching moonlight like spilled mercury. Gods, the man had no business looking like that while emotionally ruining her life. Pickles barked happily and trotted toward him. "Traitor!" Vaeloroth scratched behind the hound's ears absently before his eyes settled on Zoraya. "You disappeared. You're observant. You avoided me." "I was busy. At midnight, I'm mysterious." His mouth twitched faintly. That tiny, almost smile affected her far more than it should. Annoying. Vaeloroth stepped closer slowly. The moonlight revealed faint cracks of green glowing beneath the skin along his throat. The curse was worse tonight. Zoraya noticed immediately. "You're in pain again." His gaze sharpened. "You notice too much. You hide it badly. No one else sees it." "Well," she said softly, "I'm not everyone else." Silence fell. Dangerous silence. The prince looked at her like she'd touched something raw inside, so naturally she panicked and took another drink of wine. Unfortunately, the bottle slipped slightly from her fingers. Vaeloroth caught it instantly. His hand closed over hers. Cold. Gods, always so cold. Neither moved. The night air shifted around them softly. Pickles looked between them and sneezed out black smoke. Zoraya swallowed. "You know," she said carefully, "normal courtships usually involve less murder. I have limited experience with normal. That is painfully obvious." His thumb brushed lightly against her knuckles. Accidental, probably, but her entire body noticed. The prince went still immediately afterward, like he realized what he'd done. Then slowly, very slowly, he let go. "Coward. You should not wander alone," he murmured. "You think everything wants to kill me, everything does want to kill you. That honestly feels rude." Vaeloroth moved closer to the lake beside her. For a moment neither spoke. The water reflected the stars above them perfect, so naturally she panicked and took another drink of wine. Unfortunately, the bottle slipped slightly from her fingers. Vaeloroth caught it instantly. His hand closed over hers. Cold. Gods, always so cold. Neither moved. The night air shifted around them softly. Pickles looked between them and sneezed out black smoke. Zoraya swallowed. "You know," she said carefully, "normal courtships usually involve less murder. I have limited experience with normal. That is painfully obvious." His thumb brushed lightly against her knuckles. Accidental, probably, but her entire body noticed. The prince went still immediately afterward, like he realized what he'd done. Then slowly, very slowly, he let go. "Coward. You should not wander alone," he murmured. "You think everything wants to kill me, everything does want to kill you. That honestly feels rude." Vaeloroth moved closer to the lake beside her. For a moment neither spoke. The water reflected the stars. The man beneath the curse. God's helper, he was beautiful. The prince looked almost startled by his own laughter, like he had forgotten how. Zoraya smiled before she could stop herself. "There you are," she whispered. Something changed in his expression then, something dangerous. Hungry, not for blood, for her. The air between them tightened. Vaeloroth stepped closer slowly, too close now. Moonlight slid across the ruined side of his face, illuminating black veins beneath pale skin. But for the first time, Zoraya didn't see a monster. She saw loneliness, centuries of it. And suddenly she understood why this kingdom haunted itself. Everything here was grieving him. Her hand lifted before she could think better of it. Vaeloroth froze. Slowly, carefully, Zoraya touched the rotted side of his face. The prince inhaled sharply. The entire garden reacted instantly. Silver flowers bloomed wildly around them. The lake rippled. Somewhere deep within the castle, bells began ringing. Vaeloroth stared at her like the world had stopped turning. No disgust, no fear, just her fingers against cursed skin. "You should not touch this," he whispered hoarsely. "Why? It is ugly." So she did the most reckless thing possible. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his cold breath against her lips, close enough that the prince stopped breathing entirely. "You know what I think?" she whispered softly. Vaeloroth's gaze dropped to her mouth. Dangerous mistake. "What? I think," she murmured. "You're beautiful." The curse exploded. Green light burst through the garden violently. The flowers around them opened all at once. Vaeloroth made a broken sound low in his throat. Then suddenly, he grabbed her waist, hard, possessive, desperate. Zoraya gasped softly. The prince stared down at her like a starving man trying not to lose control. And gods, she wanted him to. His forehead lowered against hers. Cold skin, shaking hands. "You do not understand what you are doing to me," he whispered. Her pulse stumbled. "Then explain it." Vaeloroth closed his eyes, like the answer itself hurt. His voice sounded ruined. "I am trying very hard," he confessed softly, "not to love you." And somehow that hurt far more than if he'd admitted he already did. After the incident in the moon garden, Prince Vaeloroth avoided Zoraya with the intensity of a man fleeing divine judgment, which was offensive, because she should have been the one avoiding him. He was the immortal cursed prince who had nearly kissed her beside a haunted lake while glowing ominously. Yet somehow she was the one losing sleep. Disgusting. 3 days passed, 3 very frustrating days. Every time Zoraya entered a room, Vaeloroth mysteriously left it. If she walked through the library, he vanished into shadow. If she entered the dining hall, he suddenly remembered kingdom matters. Once she caught sight of him in a corridor, and the man literally turned around and walked through a wall. A wall. "That is emotionally immature," she shouted after him. The wall did not defend him. Cowardly architecture. Unfortunately, his absence only made things worse. Because now she noticed everything, the way her chest tightened when he looked at her, how safe she felt beside him, how gentle his hands became whenever he touched her, the terrible, devastating loneliness in his eyes. Worst of all, she missed him, deeply humiliating. So naturally, she decided the solution was violence. Specifically, throwing apples at Pickles while ranting in the royal kitchens. "This is his fault," she declared. Pickles barked happily while catching apples in his undead mouth. Bogmire the swamp chef sniffled nearby over a pot of soup. "I think your relationship is beautiful," the giant swamp creature sobbed. "We are not in a relationship. That makes the yearning even more tragic." Zoraya pointed a spoon threateningly. "You're all becoming too emotionally invested." From atop the cabinets, Thistle the raven screamed, "He wants to kiss you again. Thistle, you were both breathing like victims." Bogmire cried harder. "This kitchen has become unbearable," Zoraya muttered. Then suddenly, the kitchen doors opened. Vaeloroth entered. Silence crashed down instantly. Thistle fell off the cabinet dramatically. Bogmire disappeared behind a barrel despite being 7 feet tall. And Zoraya forgot how to function briefly because the prince looked unfair tonight. His dark hair was slightly damp as though he had just bathed. Black robes clung loosely to broad shoulders. The curse marks beneath his skin glowed faintly beneath the candlelight. His eyes immediately found hers, then flicked toward the apples scattered around the kitchen. "Are you attacking the hound?" He started it. Pickles barked innocently. Traitor. Vaeloroth stared at her for one long moment. And gods! The tension between them had become unbearable now. Everyone noticed it, especially the castle. The lights flickered nervously overhead. Thistle whispered loudly, "The sexual frustration in this room is historic." Vaeloroth looked ready to kill him. Zoraya burst into helpless laughter, and suddenly the prince smiled, small, real, gone too quickly, but enough to make her heart stumble painfully. "Oh," Bogmire whispered emotionally from behind the barrel. "Don't start crying again," Zoraya warned. Too late. The swamp chef sobbed into the soup. Vaeloroth looked almost relaxed for the first time since she met him. Then he spoke quietly. "The western bathhouse is empty tonight." Zoraya blinked. "What?" The prince looked faintly uncomfortable now. "Interesting. It contains the warm springs," he explained carefully. "Humans prefer heat." "Oh." Silence. Then realization struck. "Oh," Thistle screamed. Bogmire collapsed. Vaeloroth looked moments away from regretting existence itself. It was not intended. "You invited me to bathe with you." "No, but you thought about it." The prince froze. "Got him." Zoraya grinned triumphantly. Unfortunately, the faint flush creeping along the prince's throat affected her far more than it should. Vaeloroth cleared his throat roughly. The springs ease pain. His curse. Of course, the teasing faded from her expression slightly. "You're hurting again." Silence. Then, yes. That single word unraveled something inside her, because this terrifying immortal creature admitted pain only when absolutely necessary. And somehow he kept admitting it to her. Zoraya set down the spoon slowly. Then before she could overthink it, she said softly, "Show me." The prince went still. "What?" "The bathhouse." Thistle made a noise like a dying goat. Bogmire screamed into the soup pot. Zoraya ignored both of them completely. Vaeloroth stared at her with dangerous intensity now, like he was trying to decide whether this was a good idea. It absolutely wasn't, which made it inevitable. The western bathhouse looked less like a place for bathing and more like somewhere ancient gods committed seduction. Moonlight poured through enormous marble arches. Steam curled through the air in silver ribbons. At the center stretched a massive black spring glowing faintly blue beneath the water. Flowers floated across the surface. Candles lined the stone walls. And honestly, Zoraya suspected the castle had arranged this intentionally. Manipulative building. Vaeloroth stood near the edge of the spring, removing his gloves slowly. The sight of his bare hands should not have affected her so strongly. Unfortunately, life was cruel. The curse spread heavily across his arms tonight. Black veins, cracked skin glowing green beneath the surface. Pain tightened his shoulders despite how carefully he hid it. Zoraya watched quietly, then moved closer. "You carry it alone too often," she murmured. The prince looked at her sharply. "I have always carried it alone." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Something about his honesty tonight felt intimate. Dangerously intimate. Steam drifted between them softly. Vaeloroth stepped into the spring first. The glowing water hissed faintly against cursed skin. His eyes closed briefly. Relief. Small but real. Zoraya swallowed, then slowly stepped into the water too. Warmth wrapped around her instantly. Gods, this is the nicest thing in your terrifying kingdom. Vaeloroth sat across from her in the spring, silver hair damp against dark skin. Beautiful, ruined. Watching her carefully, the steam softened everything between them. No throne, no court, no monsters. Just two exhausted people suspended in quiet. For once neither joked, neither hid. The prince's gaze lowered briefly to the water sliding across her shoulders, then quickly away again. The restraint in that movement nearly killed her. Zoraya moved closer without thinking. The water rippled softly between them. Vaeloroth went completely still. Close now. too close. Her pulse stumbled as she noticed his breathing change. "You keep looking away from me," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "You make it difficult not to—" The confession sent heat rushing through her. Slowly, carefully, she reached toward his arm beneath the water. Her fingers brushed cursed skin. Vaeloroth inhaled sharply. The green glow beneath the water brightened instantly, but he didn't pull away. Instead, his hand covered hers beneath the surface. Large, cold, careful, like touching her still frightened him somehow. "Zoraya," he said softly. The way he said her name should have been illegal. She moved even closer. Now their knees brushed beneath the water. The prince's eyes darkened. Dangerous, hungry, but still restrained. Always restrained. "Tell me something true," she whispered. Vaeloroth stared at her for a long moment, then quietly admitted, "When you touch me." His voice roughened. The curse quiets. Zoraya's breath caught. Oh no, that explained far too much. The way the castle reacted. The flowers. The bells. The prince closed his eyes briefly, like the confession itself wounded him. "I have not known peace in centuries," he whispered. Her chest hurt suddenly. Before she could stop herself, her hand lifted toward his face again. Vaeloroth leaned into the touch instinctively. The movement was so slight, so vulnerable, and it absolutely destroyed her. The air between them tightened. His forehead lowered slowly toward hers, breath mingling, close enough to kiss, close enough to ruin everything. Then suddenly, the bathhouse doors slammed open. "Good news!" Thistle screamed. Both of them jumped apart violently. The raven froze mid-flight, then slowly looked between them. Steam, wet hair, heavy breathing, silence. Thistle gasped dramatically. "Oh, you were absolutely about to sin." Thistle did not survive the next 10 minutes gracefully. "I said I was sorry." The raven flew wildly through the corridors while Zoraya chased him with a decorative candle holder. "You screamed at us like a possessed church bell. You were about to make terrible decisions. That was none of your business. It became my business when the castle started moaning." Zoraya stopped dead. The corridor went silent. Slowly she turned toward the walls. The castle did what? The castle lights flickered guiltily. Somewhere nearby, a door creaked in embarrassment. "Oh my gods!" she whispered in horror. Behind her, Vaeloroth coughed into his hand suspiciously. The prince had been unusually silent since the bathhouse incident. Not calm, worse, careful, like he no longer trusted himself around her, which unfortunately only made her more aware of him. Every glance lingered now. Every accidental touch became catastrophic. Even the servants noticed. Ghost maids dramatically wept whenever they entered the same room. Bogmire had started writing poetry. It was unbearable. And tonight was somehow worse, because tonight was the winter eclipse ball, which meant politics, assassination attempts, emotional repression, wealthy fae behaving badly. Zoraya was already exhausted. "This gown is a crime," she muttered. 3 ghost maids fluttered around her in panic. The dress in question was midnight black silk, threaded with silver moonlight embroidery. The back dipped scandalously low, while sheer sleeves wrapped around her dark skin like smoke. It was beautiful, which meant the castle absolutely chose it to create problems. Mirelle floated nearby, fanning herself dramatically. "The prince is going to lose his mind. I hope he loses it quietly. That man has never done anything quietly. Fair." A knock echoed at the door. The ghost maid screamed. One passed through a wall. Mirelle grinned wickedly. "Oh, there he is." Zoraya's stomach betrayed her immediately. Traitor organ. The doors opened slowly, and Prince Vaeloroth stepped inside. Silence swallowed the room whole. Oh no. The prince wore black formal robes embroidered with silver thorns. Jewelry glimmered against pale skin. His long silver hair had been loosely tied back, exposing the sharp lines of his throat. Gods preserve her. His eyes found her and stopped. The curse beneath his skin flared instantly. Green light cracked softly beneath his throat. Vaeloroth stared at her like she had personally ended civilizations. Nobody moved. Then quietly, "You should not wear that." Zoraya blinked. What? His gaze darkened dangerously. That dress. She crossed her arms. You dislike it? No. The answer came too fast. Mirelle made a strangled noise. Vaeloroth's eyes slowly lifted back to hers, and the raw hunger in them nearly stole her breath. Oh, that was not dislike at all. That, Mirelle whispered emotionally, was the look of a man preparing homicide. Vaeloroth ignored her completely, which honestly confirmed it. The prince stepped closer slowly. Too close, his voice dropped lower. Everyone will stare at you. Zoraya tilted her head, and his jaw tightened. The room temperature dropped. Ah, jealousy. The terrifying immortal prince was jealous. This information was delightful. You are being unreasonable, she informed him. Yes. At least you're self-aware. No one else should see you like this. The possessiveness in his voice sent heat straight through her. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Before she could answer, Thistle crashed through the window again. The nobles are already taking bets. Vaeloroth closed his eyes briefly. What bets? Zoraya asked suspiciously. Thistle landed dramatically on the vanity. Whether the prince kills someone tonight because of the dress. Silence. Then, that's ridiculous. Vaeloroth said nothing. Zoraya slowly turned toward him. Oh my gods. The winter eclipse ball was catastrophic immediately. The moment Zoraya entered beside Vaeloroth, the entire ballroom noticed. Conversations stopped. Music faltered. Several nobles openly stared. And the prince became terrified. Vaeloroth kept one hand against the small of her back the entire time. Possessive, claiming, a silent warning to everyone present. Touch her and die. The message was extremely clear. Unfortunately, that only encouraged idiots. The ballroom glittered beneath floating crystal lights. Noble fae danced while servants carried silver trays through the crowd. And everywhere Zoraya turned. People stared, some with fascination, some with hatred, some with envy, especially the women, because the rotting prince looked at her like she hung the moon itself, even when trying not to. Across the ballroom, Idrion watched them carefully, expression unreadable, dangerous. The prince approached eventually, wineglass in hand. Well, he drawled softly, you both look emotionally disastrous. Vaeloroth's arm tightened slightly around Zoraya. Adrian noticed instantly. Interesting. The beautiful prince smiled faintly. To think, he murmured. Our cold-hearted monster finally learned obsession. Vaeloroth's voice turned glacial. Speak carefully. Adrian ignored him. His silver eyes slid toward Zoraya instead. You look beautiful tonight. Before she could answer, Vaeloroth spoke. She knows. Oh. The jealousy in that response nearly made her smile. Adrian noticed too, and suddenly his expression sharpened. Not amusement anymore, something darker. Careful, cousin, he said softly. You sound possessive. The curse beneath Vaeloroth's skin flared violently. Because I am... Silence crashed between them. Even Adrian looked surprised by the admission. So was Zoraya. Vaeloroth realized what he'd said 1 second too late. His entire body went still. But before anyone could speak, a servant screamed. The ballroom exploded into chaos instantly. Mirrors lining the walls shattered simultaneously. Black smoke erupted across the room. And from the broken glass, assassins emerged. Not human, not fae. Things made of shadow and knives. Guests panicked immediately. Screaming nobles fled in every direction. One assassin lunged directly towards Zoraya. Everything happened at once. Vaeloroth moved. The prince slammed her behind him as green fire exploded through the ballroom. The assassin's blade struck Vaeloroth across the shoulder and shattered instantly. The creature froze. Oh, poor decision. Vaeloroth slowly turned toward it. The prince's expression was no longer human. No anger, no restraint, just violence. Pure ancient violence. You touched her, he whispered. The assassin actually stepped backward. Then Vaeloroth attacked. The ballroom shook violently. Green fire consumed everything in its path as the prince tore through the shadow creatures like a nightmare-given form. Not graceful, brutal, terrifying. Zoraya had seen him dangerous before. This was different. This was what kingdoms feared. One assassin tried reaching her again. Vaeloroth saw it instantly and snapped. The prince unleashed the curse fully. Black rot exploded through the ballroom floor. The assassin barely had time to scream before disintegrating entirely. Silence followed. Smoke curled through the ruined hall. Broken mirrors glittered across the floor. And at the center stood Vaeloroth, breathing heavily. Monstrous. Ancient. His glowing eyes searched frantically until they found her. The moment he realized she was unharmed, relief crossed his face. Raw, terrible, human. Then Zoraya noticed the blood. Dark blood soaked through his shoulder where the blade struck him earlier. Her chest tightened instantly. "You're hurt." Vaeloroth looked down at the wound like he hadn't noticed. "I am fine." "You're bleeding. It will heal. You nearly got yourself killed." His gaze snapped back to hers fiercely. "And if I had not?" The question hit hard. The ballroom remained silent around them, everyone watching. Everyone realizing the same thing. The terrifying rotting prince would burn kingdoms for her. Vaeloroth stepped toward her slowly, blood dripping down his arm, magic crackling violently around him. Then very gently, far too gently for a creature like him, he touched her face. "You were frightened," he murmured. Zoraya's throat tightened. "Of course I was." His expression darkened with something possessive and furious. "Good," she blinked. "What?" Vaeloroth's thumb brushed softly beneath her eye. "I want you afraid," he whispered. The ballroom froze. "Not of me," his voice lowered dangerously. "Of what happens to those who try to take you from me." The ballroom smelled like smoke, blood, and magic. Broken mirrors covered the floor like frozen stars. Nobles stood in terrified silence while shadow creatures dissolved into black ash around the room. But Zoraya barely noticed any of it, because Vaeloroth was still touching her face, carefully, like she was something precious despite the blood running down his arm. The terrifying prince looked at her with such raw possessiveness, it stole the breath from her lungs. "I want you afraid," he had whispered. "Not of me, of what happens to those who try to take you from me." Gods help her. That should not have affected her this much. The ballroom remained silent around them, everyone watching, everyone realizing the impossible truth. The rotting prince was hopelessly in love. Vaeloroth seemed to realize it too, because suddenly he stepped back. His hand dropped from her face instantly, like touching her too long had become dangerous. His expression closed off again, cold, controlled, coward. "You are injured," Zoraya snapped. The prince blinked once. Interesting. Apparently no one usually yelled at him after he slaughtered assassins. "We should return to your chambers," he said instead. "That is not an answer. The wound is minor." Blood literally dripped onto the floor. Zoraya folded her arms. "You are actively leaking." Several nearby nobles looked horrified by her tone. Vaeloroth looked tired. "Zoraya, no, absolutely not. You nearly died. I did not. You look dramatic enough to—" A tiny smile tugged briefly at his mouth. Gone too quickly, but enough. Gods, she was beginning to crave those rare smiles like a curse itself. The prince glanced toward the watching ballroom. His expression darkened instantly. Everyone immediately looked away. Cowards. Then Vaeloroth quietly said, "Come with me." Something in his voice made her follow without argument. The castle was strangely silent tonight. No whispering walls, no screaming chandeliers. Even the ghosts seemed to understand something important had shifted. Vaeloroth led her through dark corridors lit by silver fire. Blood still stained his shoulder. The sight bothered her more than it should. "You should have let the guards fight. They were too slow. You could have been killed." The prince stopped walking suddenly, then turned toward her. "You think death frightens me?" The question settled heavily between them. Ancient grief flickered across his face, and suddenly Zoraya remembered. This man had lived for centuries, watched everyone he loved die, carried a curse that rotted him alive. Death probably felt merciful by comparison. Her anger softened immediately. "That isn't what frightens you," she said quietly. Vaeloroth stared at her. Dangerous mistake, because somehow she always saw too much. The prince looked away first. Again, coward. Eventually they reached his private chambers. Zoraya entered cautiously, then froze. Oh, this was surprisingly beautiful. Moonlight spilled across black marble floors. Massive windows overlooked the cursed kingdom below. Books overflowed every shelf. Silver flowers climbed the walls, and near the fireplace sat an enormous ancient piano. Zoraya blinked. "You play piano?" Vaeloroth removed his ruined coat slowly. "When the castle becomes unbearable, that is strangely romantic." "It is not. It absolutely is." The prince sighed like she exhausted dimensions beyond this one. Then he sat heavily beside the fire. Only now did Zoraya notice how pale he looked. The wound was worse than he claimed. Black blood spread across his shirt, while green curse light flickered beneath the skin around it. Zoraya crossed the room immediately. "You're hurt badly. I have survived worse. That is not comforting." She knelt beside him before thinking better of it. Vaeloroth went still instantly. Her fingers carefully touched the torn fabric near his shoulder. The prince inhaled sharply. "Not from pain. Interesting. May I?" she asked softly. His gaze locked onto hers. Then slowly, "Yes." Zoraya peeled back the ruined fabric carefully. And gods, the wound looked terrible. Dark magic spread outward from the cut like poison through water. Her chest tightened painfully. "This blade was cursed." "Yes. You knew?" "I smelled the magic. And still let it hit you." His answer came quiet. "It would have reached you otherwise." Something inside her cracked open completely then. This impossible man, this terrifying creature everyone feared, he would throw himself into death without hesitation for her. Vaeloroth watched her carefully. "You are crying!" Zoraya blinked. Oh, so she was. Annoying. "I hate when you do reckless things." Something tender flickered across his ruined face. Slowly, carefully, his cold fingers lifted toward her cheek, wiping away the tear there. The intimacy of the gesture nearly destroyed her. "You should not weep for monsters," he whispered. Zoraya looked at him for a long moment, then quietly said, "I think you stopped being a monster a long time ago." When he opened them again, everything had changed. The restraint was slipping now, dangerously. His hand remained against her face, cold skin, gentle touch, but his gaze, gods, the way he looked at her now felt almost unbearable, like wanting her had become agony. "Zoraya," he said softly, just her name, and somehow it sounded intimate enough to ruin her completely. She moved closer without realizing, or perhaps she realized, and stopped caring. Their breaths mingled beside the fire. Vaeloroth's hand slid slowly from her cheek to the back of her neck, careful, like he still feared she might disappear. "You should stop looking at me like that," she whispered. "I cannot." The honesty in his voice shattered something inside her. The prince leaned closer slowly, giving her time, giving her choice, always giving her choice despite the possessiveness burning inside him. His forehead rested lightly against hers. The curse beneath his skin glowed softly, warm for once. Not painful, peaceful, because of her. "You quiet the curse," he murmured, "and you quiet me." Silence wrapped around them, heavy, intimate. Then Vaeloroth whispered something that nearly stopped her heart. "I do not know how to survive you." That did it. Zoraya kissed him, softly at first, barely a touch, a question more than a kiss. Vaeloroth froze completely, like the world had stopped turning. Then suddenly, his hand tightened at the back of her neck, and the prince kissed her back. God, centuries of restraint broke apart all at once. The kiss was deep and aching, and devastatingly careful despite the hunger behind it. Like Vaeloroth wanted to consume her whole but feared breaking her in the process. Zoraya made a soft sound against his mouth. The prince lost what remained of his self-control instantly. Green fire burst through the room. The fireplace exploded brighter. Somewhere deep in the castle, bells began ringing wildly. The walls literally trembled. Vaeloroth pulled her closer against him with a low, broken sound in his throat. Cold hands, hot kiss, ancient loneliness unraveling beneath her touch. And gods, he kissed like a starving man finally allowed to eat. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Vaeloroth stared at her like she had ruined him, which honestly she probably had. His forehead rested against hers again, eyes closed, shaking slightly. And for the first time since she met him, he looked terrified. "Now they will use you against me." Kingdom flourished beneath the protection of the Moon Queens. Women born with celestial magic, capable of balancing life, death, and immortality itself. The queens were not rulers, they were anchors. Without them, Fae magic became unstable, wild, corrupted, and then came the plague, a sickness rotting immortals from within. The Fae royal family panicked. Desperate nobles demanded greater power, longer life, control over death itself. Among them was Prince Vaeloroth's father, King Malakir. Cruel, brilliant, terrified of mortality. He discovered something horrific. Moon magic could cure the plague, but only if the queens willingly gave their power. The queens refused. The balance of magic would collapse, so the king slaughtered them instead, one by one, burned alive inside silver temples while their power was ripped from their body. The screams shattered kingdoms, and Prince Vaeloroth, young then, beautiful then, still gentle, tried to stop it. The vision shifted violently. Zoraya saw him standing in burning halls covered in blood, begging his father to stop, saw him protect surviving witches, saw him kill royal guards trying to murder children, saw him fail. Then came the final queen, the strongest, Queen Serelith, dying, burning, cursing the royal bloodline with her last breath. May your beauty rot, may your kingdom decay, may love become your suffering, and may the prince who failed us live forever to witness it. The curse struck Vaeloroth directly, not because he deserved it most, because he survived. The vision ended violently. Zoraya stumbled backward, gasping. Vaeloroth caught her instantly, cold hands steady, his expression unreadable. You saw, not a question. Zoraya looked at him in horror. You were innocent. Silence filled the crypt. Then quietly, no. Yes, you were. I failed them. You were a child. I was a prince. The self-hatred in his voice hurt more than the visions themselves. Zoraya realized something terrible then. Vaeloroth had spent centuries believing he deserved this. The rot, the loneliness, the pain, all of it. Because he survived when others didn't. Her chest ached. Then suddenly the chamber shifted again. New visions surfaced, not of the queens, of the castle itself, the creatures of Noctaryn, their origins. The truth. Pickles had once been the hunting hound of the youngest Moon Queen. He died protecting children during the massacre. The queens resurrected him with their final magic, so he could continue guarding the innocent forever, which explained why he loved Zoraya. Bogmire had once been a royal executioner, forced to kill innocent witches under King Malakir's orders. After the curse fell, grief transformed him into the swamp creature he became. Now he fed the castle because cooking was the only thing that silenced the screams in his head. Mirelle had been a servant girl secretly helping witch children escape the slaughter. She was murdered for treason. The castle kept her ghost because Vaeloroth refused to let her die forgotten. Even Thistle, unfortunately, had once belonged to Queen Serelith herself. The raven carried fragments of her magic still, which explained why he knew everything and respected absolutely no one. And the castle? Grievemorn Keep itself had once been alive with moon magic. When the queens died, the castle mourned them. And because ancient magic grieves violently, it became haunted. The walls remembered every scream, every betrayal, every death. That was why the castle loved Vaeloroth despite everything, because like him, it had been cursed surviving. Zoraya looked slowly toward the prince, the terrifying immortal monster everyone feared, and suddenly she saw the truth clearly. Noctaryn was not cursed because of evil, it was cursed because of grief. Then Mother Nyxara spoke softly behind. There is one final truth you have not seen. The oracle pointed toward the unopened tomb at the center. Larger than the others, ancient silver symbols covered its surface. Vaeloroth's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Do not open it, he said sharply. Too late. The coffin lid cracked slowly open on its own. And from within, something breathed. The morning after the kiss, the castle lost its mind. Completely, utterly, irreversibly. Zoraya woke to screaming flowers, not metaphorically, actual screaming. She sat upright in bed as silver moonflowers outside her balcony shrieked joyfully into the sunrise. They kissed, finally. About damn time. Zoraya covered her face with a pillow. No. Outside her chamber, ghost servants sprinted through the corridors, spreading gossip like a plague. Mirel burst through the wall dramatically. "You kissed the prince!" Zoraya screamed into the pillow louder. "It was private. Nothing is private in this castle." "Fair. Unfortunate." The ghost maid floated excitedly around the room. The castle glowed all night. What? The curse weakened. Zoraya froze. Slowly she lowered the pillow. "What did you say?" Mirel blinked. Then her expression softened. "Oh," she whispered. "You didn't know." Before Zoraya could ask further questions, the entire castle suddenly shook violently. Books fell from shelves, the windows rattled, and somewhere far below the castle, something roared. Not human, not ghostly, ancient, wrong. Mirel's excitement vanished instantly. "That's bad. What is bad?" Another roar shook the walls. The moonflowers outside immediately stopped screaming. Cowardly plants. Mirel looked genuinely frightened now. The crypts opened. Oh, wonderful. Because apparently this castle had crypts. Zoraya climbed from bed immediately. Why are there crypts beneath the castle? Because the royal family keeps refusing to stay dead. That feels deeply inconsiderate. The ghost maid grabbed her wrist urgently. "You need to find the prince." "Why?" Mirel hesitated, then quietly admitted, "Because whenever the curse weakens..." The castle trembled again. Something underneath wakes up. Zoraya found Vaeloroth in the throne room surrounded by chaos. Guards shouted. Shadow creatures raced through the halls. Several nobles argued loudly while trying not to look terrified. And at the center of it all stood the prince, barely holding himself together. The curse beneath his skin glowed violently today. Not painful this time, unstable, like magic itself no longer knew what to do with him. His eyes found her instantly. Relief crossed his face before he could hide it. Then anger. "You should not be wandering alone. Your castle is screaming again. That is not the point. You kissed me unconscious and now the basement is haunted." Silence. Several guards looked scandalized. Vaeloroth pinched the bridge of his nose. "You make every sentence sound criminal." A familiar voice interrupted smoothly. "She does have a talent for it." Prince Edrian emerged from the shadows wearing silver robes and entirely too much confidence. Unfortunately, he looked irritated today. Jealous, irritated. Interesting. His silver gaze flicked between Zoraya and Vaeloroth, then toward the glowing curse marks beneath his cousin's skin. Understanding sharpened his expression instantly. "Oh," Edrian murmured softly. "Dangerous. Very dangerous. You kissed her." The room went silent. Vaeloroth's voice became glacial. "Leave." But Edrian ignored him completely. Instead, he stared at Zoraya with something almost like disbelief. "The curse weakened," he whispered. Zoraya blinked. "What?" The entire throne room tensed. Nobody spoke. Then finally Vaeloroth said quietly, "The curse reacts to you." Something cold slid down her spine. "How?" Silence. Edrian smiled faintly, cruelly. "Because our dear human bride carries moonblood." Zoraya stared at him. The throne room remained deathly silent. Then, "I still don't know what that means." Vaeloroth's jaw tightened. So naturally, Edrian answered instead. "Centuries ago," he said softly, "the first queens of Noctaryn wielded moon magic powerful enough to bind life, death, and souls themselves." The castle lights flickered nervously. The royal family slaughtered them for power. Vaeloroth looked away. "Ah, guilt again." Edrian continued calmly. "The dying queens cursed our bloodline. Rot, decay, immortality without peace, a kingdom unable to heal. And now," Edrian said softly, "their blood lives in you." Zoraya's stomach twisted. "That's impossible." "No," came another voice. Everyone turned. Mother Nixara entered the throne room slowly. The blind oracle looked exhausted today, almost frightened. The moon chose her long before she was born. Vaeloroth stiffened. "What do you mean?" Nixara's white eyes lifted toward Zoraya. "Your mother knew." Silence crashed through the room. Zoraya froze. "My mother?" The oracle nodded slowly. "She hid you among mortals after the massacre." Everything inside Zoraya went still. Her mother, the woman who died when she was small, the woman Seraphine never spoke about. She was one of the last Moonblood queens, Nixara whispered. The throne room erupted into chaos instantly. Nobles shouted. Guards panicked. Someone fainted dramatically again. But Zoraya barely heard any of it, because Vaeloroth was staring at her like the world had just changed shape. Then suddenly, the ground cracked. A horrifying roar exploded beneath the castle. Everyone froze. Black rot burst upward through the marble floor, and from the cracks emerged skeletal hands. Oh, absolutely not. Nobles screamed. Several guards ran immediately. Reasonable. The entire castle shook violently as ancient dead things began clawing upward from beneath the throne room. "The crypt seal is breaking!" Nixara shouted. Vaeloroth moved instantly. Green fire erupted from his hands as he forced the dead back toward the cracks, but something was wrong. The curse flickered violently around him, weakening, unstable. Pain crossed his face sharply. "Vaeloroth!" Zoraya shouted. The prince staggered slightly. Edrian's expression darkened. "The curse is fighting the bond." "What bond?" Nixara looked terrified. "The mating, silence, dead silence." Zoraya blinked once, then slowly turned toward Vaeloroth. "The what?" The prince looked genuinely trapped for the first time in centuries. "Interesting." Edrian looked delighted by his suffering. "When a Moonblood queen loves a cursed Fae king," he explained smoothly, "their souls bind together." Zoraya stared. Vaeloroth looked ready to commit murder. Nixara spoke urgently. "The bond can break the curse completely." Hope flickered painfully across the throne room. Then the oracle continued. "But only if the queen willingly gives her life force to the king." Silence. Everything stopped. Zoraya's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" No one answered immediately, which was answer enough. The realization hit cold and hard. To cure Vaeloroth, she would slowly die. "No," Vaeloroth said instantly. The force in his voice shook the room. Nixara looked heartbroken. "It is the only cure. Then there will be no cure." Green fire exploded violently around the prince. The dead recoiled instantly. Vaeloroth's eyes locked onto Zoraya's, furious, terrified, absolutely certain. "I would rather rot forever," he said hoarsely, "than watch you die for me." And somehow, that was the moment Zoraya realized she truly loved him. After discovering she might literally die curing the curse, Zoraya reacted with maturity and grace. Specifically, she stole 3 bottles of royal wine, insulted 2 nobles, and climbed onto the castle roof. "This feels unsafe," Morel observed, floating beside her. "It feels symbolic. You almost fell off twice." "I'm processing emotionally." Below them, Noctaryn stretched beneath silver twilight. The cursed kingdom glowed softly in the darkness, beautiful and haunted all at once. Unfortunately, Zoraya's thoughts kept returning to Vaeloroth. Idiot prince. Impossible prince. The man had looked genuinely horrified at the idea of losing her. Not politically inconvenienced, not guilty, terrified. And somehow that frightened her more than the undead clawing from the castle floor earlier. Because now she knew the truth, Vaeloroth loved her, and worse, she loved him back, which meant the universe would absolutely ruin everything soon. The roof tiles shifted suddenly beneath her. "Oh no," the castle groaned. Then a hidden doorway slowly opened beside the chimney. Zoraya stared. "You cannot keep revealing secret passages every time I have emotions." The castle creaked proudly. Morel gasped dramatically. "Oh, it likes you too much. That is not comforting." The hidden staircase descended deep beneath the castle. Very deep. The air grew colder with every step. Stranger, ancient whispers echoed through the darkness. And halfway down, Zoraya realized something deeply concerning. The castle was hiding this place from Vaeloroth. "Oh, that feels illegal." Morel looked nervous now. "I've never seen this passage before." "Excellent, wonderful, exactly what every woman wanted to hear while descending into cursed darkness." At the bottom of the stairs stood enormous silver doors carved with moon symbols, and written across them in ancient glowing script, "Only the last queen may enter." Silence. Morel looked horrified. Zoraya looked tired. "Of course it says that." The doors slowly opened on their own. Because apparently privacy no longer existed in her life. The chamber beyond stole her breath. Moonlight poured from nowhere overhead, illuminating a hidden underground sanctuary. Silver trees grew through black stone floors. Ancient mirrors lined the walls. and at the center of the chamber stood a crystal coffin. Oh, absolutely not. Zoraya approached slowly. Inside the coffin rested a woman, dark-skinned, beautiful. Long braids decorated with silver jewelry curled around her sleeping form. She looked peaceful, not dead, sleeping. Zoraya's heartbeat stumbled. The woman looked like her. Not exactly, but enough. "Oh," Mirelle whispered shakily. A voice echoed suddenly through the chamber. "You have her eyes." Zoraya spun around. Mother Nixara stood in the shadows beside the entrance. The oracle looked exhausted and guilty. "You knew about this place," Zoraya accused. "Yes, wonderful. Everyone in this kingdom enjoys hiding life-changing information from me." Nixara approached the crystal coffin slowly. The woman inside was Queen Asheline. The name seemed to ripple through the room itself. The last true Moon Queen. Zoraya frowned. "She looks alive. She is—" That somehow felt worse. Nixara's blind eyes lifted toward Zoraya. She placed herself into eternal sleep to survive the massacre. Silence. Then, "So there's an immortal Moon Queen sleeping beneath the castle?" "Yes, and nobody thought this was important information." The oracle ignored that entirely. She was meant to awaken when the curse began breaking. Zoraya's stomach tightened. "And it's breaking now." Nixara nodded slowly. "Because of you." The crystal coffin suddenly cracked. Mirelle screamed. Zoraya screamed louder. Silver light exploded through the chamber, and slowly, the queen's eyes opened. Gold, glowing gold. The ancient queen sat upright smoothly like death itself had become elegant. Zoraya took one look at the terrifying immortal woman and immediately decided this entire day was rude. Queen Asheline stepped from the coffin barefoot. Moonlight curled around her body like living silk. Power rolled through the chamber so heavily the walls trembled. Then the queen looked directly at Zoraya and smiled softly. "My child." Zoraya pointed at herself. "I think there's been confusion." Asheline laughed quietly. The sound was warm, ancient, dangerous. "You carry my blood." Apparently everyone already knew that except me. The queen's expression softened sad. "Your mother wanted to protect you." Zoraya froze. "You knew my mother?" A flicker of grief crossed Asheline's face. "I loved her very much." Something in her voice made Zoraya's chest ache. "Family, real family, not Seraphine's cruelty, not loneliness, family." Then suddenly, the chamber doors exploded open. Vaeloroth stormed inside, surrounded by green fire, terrifying, furious, panicked. His eyes found Zoraya instantly. Relief crossed his face so intensely it almost hurt to witness. Then he noticed Asheline, and froze. The prince looked genuinely stunned for once in his immortal existence. "Impossible." The ancient queen smiled faintly. "Little rot prince." Mirelle made a strangled sound. Zoraya blinked. "Little what?" Vaeloroth looked deeply offended. Asheline stepped toward him calmly. "You survived longer than expected. That is a terrible greeting." The queen's golden eyes softened unexpectedly. "You loved her." Silence. Vaeloroth's entire body went rigid. "Interesting. Very interesting." Asheline looked between them slowly, then sighed. "Oh dear." Zoraya narrowed her eyes immediately. That phrase never brings good news. The queen looked almost amused. "The bond between you has already begun." Vaeloroth's expression darkened instantly. "It can still be severed." "No," Asheline said quietly. "It cannot." The chamber fell silent. Zoraya's pulse stumbled. What exactly happens if the bond completes? No one answered immediately, which meant the answer was catastrophic. Asheline finally looked toward her. "If one of you dies," she whispered softly, "the other follows." Silence. Absolute silence. Then Zoraya said weakly, "Well?" Vaeloroth looked furious. Not at her, at fate itself, at the curse, at the entire universe. Then suddenly the castle shook violently overhead. A horrifying roar echoed through the foundations. Not the dead this time. Something bigger, something ancient. Asheline's expression changed instantly. Fear, real fear. "Oh no," the queen whispered. The walls cracked. Black rot spread across the chamber floor. and from somewhere deep beneath the castle, something enormous began waking up. Then Vaeloroth said the single least comforting sentence Zoraya had ever heard. The Hollow King is free. The Hollow King emerged at dawn. And the world nearly ended. The creature rose from beneath Noctaryn like a nightmare dragged screaming from the grave of history itself. Entire mountains shook. The skies turned black. The cursed forests howled. Zoraya stood atop the highest tower of Grievemorn Keep beside Vaeloroth as the earth split open far below the kingdom. And from the abyss came something ancient. Massive antlers scraped the clouds. A body made of bones, shadows, and writhing rot climbed from the darkness. The Hollow King. The first Fae ruler ever cursed. The origin of all decay. The thing feeding on Noctaryn for centuries. "It's ugly," Zoraya said honestly. Vaeloroth looked deeply offended by her priorities. "That is your observation? It's important to me," the Hollow King roared again. Thousands of dead things answered from the forests below. Wonderful. In silver moonlight. "The curse is trying to survive," the ancient queen said grimly. "It will consume the kingdom entirely if the bond is not completed." Vaeloroth immediately turned toward Zoraya. "No. Oh, absolutely not. Not this again." "You don't get to decide that alone," Zoraya snapped. "I will not allow you to die for me, and I will not allow your dramatic corpse king grandfather to eat the kingdom. He is not my grandfather. Whatever he is, he looks deeply unpleasant." The Hollow King smashed through an entire mountain in the distance. The kingdom screamed, literally screamed. The castle trembled violently beneath them. Asheline stepped closer urgently. "There is another way." Silence. Vaeloroth narrowed his eyes. "You said there was none." "There wasn't," the queen admitted quietly, "until the bond changed." Zoraya blinked. "Changed how?" Asheline looked between them, then smiled faintly. "You truly fell in love." Silence. Vaeloroth looked away instantly. "Coward." The queen continued. "The original curse demanded sacrifice, because the Fae kings only understood possession." Moonlight flared around her. "But true love does not consume." The air shifted. Ancient magic stirred through the kingdom. Asheline raised one glowing hand toward Zoraya. "You are not meant to die for him." Hope flickered painfully across Vaeloroth's face. "The curse can instead be broken willingly." Zoraya frowned. "That sounds suspiciously easy." "It is not. Of course. Nothing in this kingdom could simply behave normally." Asheline's expression darkened. "The king must surrender immortality." Silence crashed down. Vaeloroth froze. The Hollow King roared again below the mountains. Storms split the skies. But for one long moment, the prince said nothing. Immortality. The only thing he had left after centuries of loss. The only shield against grief. Against time. Against death. Zoraya slowly reached for his hand. Cold fingers tightened around hers immediately. "You'd become mortal?" she whispered. Vaeloroth stared at her, then quietly admitted, "I do not remember what it feels like to live. Gods, that hurt." The prince lifted her hand slowly to his lips, gentle, reverent. "But if it means keeping you," he whispered against her skin, "I would surrender eternity itself." Well, that nearly destroyed her emotionally. Asheline smiled softly. "The curse has already weakened because you chose each other freely." The queen turned toward the monstrous Hollow King in the distance. "Now finish it." The battle for Noctaryn became legend. Ghosts rose from the castle crypts. Moonlight flooded the skies, the cursed forests awakened fully. And at the center of it all stood Zoraya and Vaeloroth hand in hand atop the black cliffs overlooking the kingdom. The Hollow King towered before them. Ancient, monstrous, rot itself given life. The creature roared as green decay spread across the land. But this time, the curse did not answer him, because Vaeloroth let it go. Zoraya felt the moment it happened. The prince gasped sharply beside her. Black rot cracked across his skin, then shattered. Light exploded across the kingdom. The curse screamed, actually screamed. The Hollow King staggered backward in horror, and slowly, very slowly, The decay left Vaeloroth's body. Zoraya stared. The blackened veins vanished first, then the cracked skin healed. The curse light faded beneath pale flesh, the twisted antlers dissolved into silver ash, and for the first time in centuries, Prince Vaeloroth stood untouched by rot. The kingdom fell silent, even the wind stopped moving. Gods, he was beautiful before. Now he looked unreal, like something ancient gods carved from moonlight and sin. Silver hair spilled around a face so devastatingly handsome, it honestly felt disrespectful to everyone else alive. His eyes no longer glowed with cursed green. Instead, they burned bright silver beneath the dawn. The immortal sorrow was gone too. No pain, no decay, just him, alive. The prince looked down at his own hands slowly, breathing hard, mortal. Then the hollow king screamed in rage. Without the curse feeding it, the creature began collapsing. Moonlight consumed the monster entirely, and with one final roar, the hollow king turned to dust. Silence followed. Then suddenly, the kingdom bloomed. Flowers erupted across Noctaryn instantly. The black rivers turned silver blue, the skies cleared. Sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in centuries. Real sunlight. The people of Noctaryn fell to their knees weeping. The curse was gone, and beside her, Vaeloroth smiled. Not the cold, almost smile she'd stolen before. A real smile, warm, alive, beautiful enough to stop wars. Zoraya stared at him helplessly. Oh no. The newly uncursed prince blinked. What? You're hot now? Vaeloroth looked deeply offended. I was attractive before. You looked haunted and emotionally flammable. And now? She looked him up slowly, then sighed dramatically. Now you look like rich temptation. Asheline burst into laughter nearby. 3 weeks later, Noctaryn became the richest kingdom in the world. Turns out removing centuries of curses was excellent for the economy. Trade routes reopened. The dead forests bloomed into magical gardens. Ancient treasures hidden beneath the kingdom resurfaced. Gold practically flooded through Noctaryn. Every noble family across the continent suddenly became very interested in alliances. And unfortunately, so did Seraphine Mourning Veil. Zoraya's stepmother arrived at Grievemorn Keep with her daughter Celestia, dressed in enough jewels to blind a dragon. The moment Seraphine saw Vaeloroth now, alive, uncursed, devastatingly beautiful, king of the wealthiest kingdom alive, regret consumed her instantly. Absolute poisonous regret. You, she whispered weakly. Vaeloroth stared at her blankly. Who are you? Zoraya nearly choked, trying not to laugh. Seraphine looked horrified. I am Lady Mourningveil. I do not care. Gods! That was incredibly attractive of him. Celestia stepped forward shyly then. Unlike Zoraya, her stepsister was pale and delicate, all soft curls and practiced innocence. She stared at Vaeloroth like women stared at treasure. Unfortunately for her, the king only looked irritated. Seraphine recovered quickly. Too quickly. You must understand, she said smoothly. We never imagined the curse would break. Zoraya narrowed her eyes immediately. Ah, the greed was speaking now. The stepmother smiled toward Vaeloroth. My daughter Celestia would make a far more suitable queen. Silence. Dead silence. Then, what? Seraphine gestured elegantly toward Celestia. She is noble, refined, obedient. Boring, Zoraya interrupted, and would never embarrass the throne. Vaeloroth slowly turned toward Zoraya, then back toward Seraphine. Silver fire flickered dangerously in his eyes now. Interesting. Apparently removing the curse did not remove the violence. Excellent, Seraphine continued smiling. You deserve a proper wife, Your Majesty. The entire throne room went still, because suddenly Vaeloroth laughed, softly at first, then harder, real laughter, the kind that terrified armies. Seraphine's smile faltered. The king descended from his throne slowly, beautiful, deadly. Every noble in the room held their breath. Vaeloroth stopped beside Zoraya, then casually pulled her against his chest, possessive, effortless, terrifying. She is my proper wife, he said softly. Seraphine stiffened. But surely now that the curse is broken. My love for her is not. The throne room fell silent. Vaeloroth's arm tightened around Zoraya's waist. And if you insult my queen again, he continued pleasantly, I will feed you to pickles. From the corner of the room, the undead corpse hound barked excitedly. Seraphine went pale instantly. Meanwhile, Zoraya smiled slowly against her husband's chest. Oh, being queen was going to be fun. Queen Zoraya quickly discovered two important truths about ruling Noctaryn. First, being queen was surprisingly enjoyable. Second, nobles were exhausting. "Why are they all staring at me like I personally invented scandal?" she whispered. Vaeloroth sat lazily beside her on the obsidian throne, looking entirely too handsome for public safety. "It is because yesterday you threatened a duke with a soup ladle. He insulted pickles. That is fair. The royal court had changed dramatically since the curse broke. No more rotting walls, no more endless darkness. Sunlight now streamed through Grievemorn Keep's massive windows, illuminating silver vines blooming along the marble columns. The kingdom itself thrived. Children laughed in streets once haunted by ghosts. Trade ships flooded the rivers. Music echoed through the castle instead of screams. And everywhere Zoraya walked, people smiled at her. Not out of fear, love, which still startled her sometimes. Across the throne room, Thistle the raven sat proudly atop a chandelier. The people worship her because she's funny. I am not ruling through comedy. You called a baroness spicy dust. She deserved it. Vaeloroth coughed suspiciously into his hand. Traitor husband, gods. Even thinking the word still felt unreal sometimes. Because despite everything, the curse, the monsters, the attempted murders, she had somehow found home here. With him. Unfortunately, peace never lasted long in stories like hers, and trouble always wore perfume. Seraphine Mourningveil returned to the castle smiling, which was immediately suspicious. The stepmother had become unusually pleasant these past few weeks. Too pleasant. She complimented Zoraya constantly, sent gifts, even apologized publicly for her past cruelty. No one trusted it, especially not Vaeloroth. "She smells like conspiracy," he muttered, while watching Seraphine across the banquet hall. Zoraya blinked. "You can smell conspiracy?" "Yes. That feels medically concerning." The king ignored her entirely. His silver eyes remained fixed on Seraphine and Celestia, seated among the nobles tonight. The stepsister looked pale recently, restless, like guilt gnawed at her from the inside. Unlike her mother, Celestia had never truly been cruel. Weak, perhaps, jealous, but not vicious. Seraphine, however, that woman radiated evil ambition. And tonight she kept staring at the crown on Zoraya's head with naked hunger. Oh no, not again. Later that evening, Zoraya woke suddenly. Something felt wrong. The castle felt wrong. The walls whispered nervously. Silver flames flickered violently along the corridors outside her chambers. Beside her, Vaeloroth slept peacefully for once. Rare, beautiful, annoyingly distracting. Moonlight spilled across his bare chest while silver hair tangled across dark sheets. Honestly, it should have been illegal to look that attractive unconscious. But then, a scream echoed somewhere beneath the castle. Zoraya sat upright instantly. Vaeloroth woke immediately, not groggy, not confused, violently alert. The former cursed king moved like a predator now, even without the rot. Another scream echoed underground. Female, panicked. The castle shook. Vaeloroth's expression darkened instantly. The old ritual chambers. Zoraya frowned. Why would anyone be down there? Then realization hit both of them simultaneously. Seraphine. Oh, for the love of gods. The ritual chamber smelled like blood, smoke, and desperation. By the time they arrived, chaos had already begun. Black candles burned along ancient stone walls carved with forbidden symbols. A massive cauldron boiled violently at the center of the room, and sprawled across the floor. Celestia, convulsing. Green-black veins spread rapidly beneath her skin. The curse. Zoraya froze. No. Seraphine knelt beside the cauldron, sobbing hysterically. It wasn't supposed to happen. Vaeloroth moved instantly toward Celestia, but the moment he touched her arm, the curse recoiled violently. Wrong. This wasn't his old curse. This one was twisted, fresh, made intentionally. Zoraya's stomach dropped. You tried to curse me. Seraphine looked up wildly. Tears streaked her face. She stole everything from us. The hatred in her voice echoed through the chamber. The kingdom, the crown, him. Vaeloroth's expression became terrifyingly cold. Seraphine pointed shakily toward the cauldron. The potion was meant for you. Silence. Then slowly. Zoraya understood. The banquet wine. Gods! Celestia whimpered weakly on the floor. She drank it by mistake, Zoraya whispered. Seraphine broke completely then. She thought it was medicine. The curse spread further beneath Celestia's skin. Her body arched painfully. Green foam touched her lips. Vaeloroth looked grim. This is death magic. No, Seraphine sobbed. No, there must be a cure. There isn't, he said quietly. The same curse she intended for Zoraya. The same cruelty, now consuming her own daughter instead. Celestia reached weakly toward her mother, terrified. Mother. Seraphine collapsed beside her. I didn't mean for this, but intent no longer mattered. The curse pulsed violently. Then suddenly, the cauldron exploded. Black magic erupted through the chamber. The curse tore from Celestia's body in a violent scream and slammed directly into Seraphine instead. The woman shrieked. Green-black rot spread instantly across her skin. The ritual had turned against its creator. Ancient magic demanding payment. No! Seraphine screamed. But the curse kept spreading. Her beauty cracked apart rapidly. Rot consumed her hands, her face, her voice. Vaeloroth stepped protectively before Zoraya immediately. Touch her and die, always. Seraphine looked towards Zoraya desperately now. Help me! The queen stared at the woman who sold her like livestock, who abused her, who tried to murder her. And somehow, Zoraya still felt not revenge, not triumph, just sadness, because greed had destroyed this family long before magic ever touched it. Celestia's breathing weakened beside the altar. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered weakly towards Zoraya, and for the first time in her life, she sounded sincere. Zoraya moved instantly. Vaeloroth caught her wrist. The curse is unstable. She's dying. So is Seraphine. Zoraya looked down at Celestia trembling on the floor, then quietly whispered, I know what it's like to have a mother who destroys you. Something shattered in Vaeloroth's expression. Slowly, he released her wrist. Zoraya knelt beside her stepsister carefully. Celestia looked terrified. I never hated you, she whispered brokenly. I just wanted someone to choose me first. Gods, that hurt. Zoraya took her shaking hand gently. You should have chosen yourself. Celestia cried softly then. The curse continued consuming Seraphine near. The woman screamed and begged and clawed at the floor as rot spread across her body. Ancient magic showed no mercy. In the end, Celestia died first, quietly, her hand slipping from Zoraya's fingers beneath silver candlelight. And moments later, Seraphine followed, consumed by the very curse she created. Silence filled the chamber afterward. Heavy, sad, Vaeloroth stepped behind Zoraya slowly, then wrapped his arms around her from behind, warm now, alive. His forehead rested against her hair. You tried to save them, he murmured softly. Zoraya stared at the extinguished candles. At least one of them deserved it. The king held her tighter. And deep beneath the castle, the last echoes of the curse finally died. Beloved kingdom in the world. Feared, because its king could still terrify armies with a single look. Beloved, because its queen once publicly threatened a corrupt ambassador with a roasted turkey leg. The people never stopped talking about. I regret nothing, Zoraya declared proudly. You hit him with poultry, Vaeloroth replied. He was being annoying. Their children overheard this conversation with delight. Mother committed diplomacy violence again, 6-year-old Nymeria announced happily. It was light violence, Zoraya corrected. Across the royal gardens, 8-year-old Kalor nearly fell out of a tree laughing. And beside the fountain, little twin princes Razian and Solivar were attempting to put a tiny crown on Pickles. The undead corpse hound remained deeply patient throughout the process, mostly because the children fed him treats constantly. Life in Noctaryn had become loud now, warm, alive. The cursed kingdom, once filled with ghosts and rot, now bloomed beneath silver sunlight and moonlit gardens. The black rivers shimmered with magic. Ancient forests flourished. Markets overflowed with trade from every realm. Even the castle changed. Grieve keep no longer whispered in sorrow. Now it laughed. Literally. The walls occasionally laughed at inappropriate moments, especially whenever the king kissed the queen in public. "They're in love again," the chandeliers would whisper emotionally. "It has been over a decade," Vaeloroth muttered once, "and yet you still stare at her like a dying man seeing water." The castle had a point. The king never stopped looking at her that way, not once, even now, especially now. Zoraya stood barefoot beneath silver trees, wearing a crown she still occasionally forgot belonged to her, dark skin glowing beneath moonlight, braided gold and silver woven through her hair, beautiful, powerful, loved. Vaeloroth watched her from across the garden with the exact same devastating expression he wore the first time he realized he could not survive losing her. Hopelessly in love, still, always. The former Rotting Prince had become legend over the years. Songs spread across kingdoms about the terrifying Fae King whose curse shattered for love, about the queen who changed death itself, about the kingdom that healed. And gods, the man remained unfairly handsome. Immortality might be gone, but the centuries of elegance remained. Silver hair, sharp silver eyes, a smile capable of ending wars. Women across entire continents still fainted when meeting him. Unfortunately for them, King Vaeloroth cared for exactly one woman. He crossed the gardens now, while their children chased pickles through the flowers. "You are smiling suspiciously," Zoraya told him. "You threatened a diplomat with cutlery this morning. He deserved fear," Vaeloroth hummed thoughtfully. "You are an alarming queen, and yet you adore me." The king stepped close enough to wrap one arm around her waist. Effortless, possessive. After all these years, he still touched her like she might disappear. "You gave me a life," he murmured softly. Zoraya's chest tightened the same way it always did when he looked at her like that. The terrifying thing was, he still meant it. Even after 10 years, even after children and wars and rebuilding kingdoms together, the love between them never softened. It deepened, like roots, like magic, like home. Nearby, their daughter Nymeria screamed suddenly. Razian bit the ambassador again. Silence. Then Vaeloroth sighed. "That is the third ambassador this month. He's developing hobbies. I fear he inherited your diplomacy skills." Zoraya gasped dramatically. "You wound me." The king kissed her before she could continue arguing. Slow, warm, familiar. The kind of kiss built from years instead of desperation. And somewhere around them, the castle sighed dreamily. "Disgustingly in love," whispered the curtains. "Absolutely pathetic," agreed the chandeliers. Their children groaned loudly. "Not again!" Kaelor yelled from the tree. Zoraya laughed against her husband's mouth. The sound echoed through the flourishing kingdom once cursed by death itself. No more rot, no more loneliness, no more monsters hiding behind grief. Only love. A dark kingdom reborn beneath silver sky, and a queen who was once sold away, now ruling beside the man who would have destroyed worlds for